Good morning. I'm going to call this meeting to order at 9:30 today. Good morning and thank you all for your attendance here today. I'm Deputy Mayor Adam Pearson and I will be chairing this special council meeting today. I'm joined by staff and members of council. We have Councillor Les Andrews, Councillor Todd Attridge, Councillor Claire Holloway-Woodwani, Councillor Vicky Mink, Councillor Daryl Toms, and of course our lovely Mayor, Mayor Olena Hankivski.
I've become lovely now.
Upgrades. A moment of silent reflection. I'd like to begin by taking a moment to pause in silent reflection as we honor the memory of former councillor and Deputy Mayor Jeff Lees. Jeff was, without a doubt, the biggest community volunteer I have ever known. His 25 years on council represents an extraordinary legacy of public service. Few people give that much of themselves to one place for that long with such consistency and care. Jeff understood the history of this town, respected its people, and worked tirelessly to protect and improve it for the future generations. His knowledge, perspective, and calm presence shaped countless decisions that continue to impact Port Hope today. Moving on to the land acknowledgement. The municipality of Port Hope exists on the lands of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe traditional territories covered by the Williams Treaties. We honor and recognize First Peoples as rights holders and stewards of the lands and the waters in which we have the privilege to live, work, and play, including the Ganaraska River and forest. We pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging. We commit to actions towards truth and reconciliation by recognizing the United Nations Declarations of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, strengthening ties with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, especially those that make their home here in Port Hope, and learning from Indigenous ways of knowing and being. We do so by recognizing the past and working towards a shared future. Moving on, disclosure of pecuniary interest. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest today? I note that none were received in advance. Seeing none, moving on. So today's meeting marks the beginning of Council's consideration of the staff proposed budget. This discussion is being initiated in accordance with the budget process outlined by our finance team at the December 15th Council meeting and in alignment with the Strong Mayor's legislative framework that came into effect in May of last year, as well as the mayoral directives and decisions with respects to this process. The purpose of today's session is to listen carefully to the presentation, ask questions, and engage in discussion and deliberation. This is an opportunity for Council to fully understand the proposed budget before moving forward in the process. Given that our focus today is on listening and information gathering, I am encouraging members to refrain from bringing forward motions as we move through this agenda. Instead, I ask that motions be considered once Council has received all the relevant information and has had the opportunity to fully deliberate. My fellow Council members, if you wish to propose a motion, please prepare specific wording. The clerk's team has provided guidance on this, so ensure that your language is ready. If you have any questions or need assistance, please connect with the clerk's team or the finance team. Finally, let's keep our discussion respectful and keep it on topic. I also want to note that we will be having periodic breaks throughout the day, as let's be honest, this is going to be a pretty long session. So, moving on to the 2026 staff proposed budget and presentation, I would now like to turn this over to our CAO and to Director Baxter.
Good morning, Council. First of all, I want to say welcome. Thank you for, the next 2 days, well, Tuesday and Thursday, for your engagement in this process. I want to thank you for joining us this morning. I also want to thank you, Leah, our youth counselor that also joined us this morning. Unfortunately, Emily couldn't make it, so thank you for skipping out of school and hearing everything budget. So truly appreciate it, and really would love your feedback and input on that if you've got any suggestions. So first of all, I am super excited about this. This is my first budget with Port Hope. Watched the process go through, had some input, but really reliant and really proud of the work that the finance team has done to pull this together in a short time. There's lots of opportunities to look at how we do things differently, but I wanted to watch the process go through this year, and I think we're in a great position. As the deputy mayor suggested, this is a staff budget. This is a staff created budget to put forward to you guys for deliberation. So we want your input, we want your feedback, and really appreciate it. It is a complex budget. We are a little bit later than we would have typically been in prior years. Normally we would have come for a December approval to council, budget deliberations in November. There is significant complexities that we wanted to make sure we got everything right. And so that's why we are a little bit later in the process, but better later than never. Some really key concepts with this budget. And part of the delay was too, we really wanted the strat plan over the line so that we could align to the strat plan. And you're going to see the finance team did a great job aligning the budget to the strat plan as we go through it, as Director Baxter walked through that. So there was a significant alignment to the strat plan to show how we're achieving the goals and direction the council wanted to achieve for the next year. Another big piece of this is closing the infrastructure gap, and that was a major focus of that. We heard that in prior years through prior budgets, and that is primary goal of this budget as well, is to help do those right things that are going to help close the infrastructure gap. And the other big component of this is getting ready for potentially the world's largest nuclear power plant and being growth ready for the future. It's coming quickly, it's coming fast, and we've had to do a lot of changes and pivots that and close some gaps in our organization that will help us be ready, future-proof us to be ready for that massive growth that will be coming. And I think this budget is a starting point, and with support of our provincial and partners and OPG, we are able to accomplish that and be really, I think, prepared to handle the influx of growth that we're going to experience. We are, we've taken this budget, it is a staff budget, but at the mayor's direction, we are, we're trying to keep this a very collaborative approach with council and continuing forward with the way the budget has always been handled in the past. So it's a collaborative approach open for discussion, and that's where we will be, and I think Director Baxter will walk through the process of, how we can do some motions and things like that if you have any recommended changes. So most of all, I want to thank the finance team who have been working on this for months and months and months and sleepless hours. So there's a lot of work that's gone on behind the scenes. So culminating into today, and hopefully we will get this wrapped up as soon as possible. So many thanks to my finance team. Great job. So I'm going to pass it off to Director Baxter, to Sruthi, to kick off the presentation.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to start off by just going over the agenda for what we can expect for the rest of the day. So we're going to start off with some budget context. So some of the themes, some of the kind of focus areas when preparing this budget. Next, we'll talk a little bit about the budget comms that have both occurred so far, as well as the budget comms that are prepared for post-adoption. We'll go over some comparators, which was a specific request by council as well, and we've done this 2 years ago in the 2024 budget, so we're going to update you on some of those comparators this year. Then we'll walk through the highlights of the operating budget and the capital budget, culminating to the budget summary, and then go over some next steps at the end of it. So as we're going through this agenda, as mentioned before, we will have a couple of breaks in between, but I would recommend, if you have any questions as we're going through, hold your questions or have them noted down until the end of like a section. That way we can complete the section, get all the information for that piece, and then go through and answer the questions. So we'll let you know when the floor is open for questions. So starting off with some budget context, these are some of the notable considerations that were top of mind when preparing the budget. So the first couple you'll see there is with relation to asset management, both from integrating the asset management plan itself and also following the funding strategy that was recommended in the asset management presentation that was done midway through last year. Oops. some of the challenges that we were, thinking of as we're preparing this budget is low tax-based growth as well as reduced DC revenue, especially with the changes in legislation that are making it even harder to do so. Mike mentioned earlier that we are preparing for growth, so we've kept that in mind as well. We are into the second phase of realigning our base budget, so we've started last year. We're continuing on this year. We're using some non-levy sources, or we're using more non-levy sources of funding this year to try to fund a lot more of the one-time items and service level changes. All of this to minimize the impact to the taxpayer. We also have a new strat plan, as was mentioned, so we had a renewed focus on aligning all of the budget items, or as many as we can, to the strat plan. We also kept in mind the change in process with the strong mayor legislation in terms of timelines and just general overall process, and then ensure to incorporate any operational impact from the election this year. I just wanted to highlight a few checkpoints throughout the budget roadmap that would have been presented at the kickoff meeting that we have now satisfied. So we have a few annual updates that have now been presented to council that would be good context as we're entering into budget deliberations. Some other notable items, though, is the asset management levels of service presentation that was completed again earlier midway through last year. 3 budgets for 2026 have already been presented from the board, so that's the library, police, and HBIA. And then obviously the strat plan establishment also. We cannot prepare the budget without our main guiding forces, which are our vision, mission, and values. Generally, we were focused on innovation, the changing needs of Port Hope with growth, as well as being sustainable. I just have a slide here to just remind everyone what our strategic plan pillars are and in the initiatives. I'm not going to go through all of them, but as you're going through the presentation, we've tried to categorize as many of the operating and capital items into these buckets. There are times where there might be initiative that might fall into multiple buckets, but it is being categorized in the bucket that is the most relevant to. And I'll start off with a little bit of a higher level overview before we get into kind of the details of the budget. So including operating and capital items, we have about 20.1 million in strategic plan related items. So this could be items that are explicitly mentioned as an initiative under the strat plan, or items that staff have rationalized to be related to a strategic pillar. We also have 22.9 million in total capital projects, of which 4.7 million are levy funded and the rest are either grant funded, utility rate funded, or we're getting funding from some other sources. So you'll see a detail about that a little bit later as well. So all of that culminates to a $176 increase on the average municipal tax bill, or a 3.42%, which is lower than last year, and was one of our goals for preparing the budget, was to minimize the impact to the taxpayer. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Kate to talk about the budget comms. Kate.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm just going to take a quick opportunity to review some of the ongoing budget communications that have been going on for the last several months, actually. And we'll continue on post-adoption of the budget. I don't really know how this, there we go. In collaboration with the finance team, we determined our budget focus areas this year, budget communications focus areas, would be asset management and the infrastructure gap, as well as the budget process change. Now that the strong mayor powers are in effect. And additionally, the understanding the tax dollar allocation, which is something we tend to keep as a theme for budget communications every single year as we try and educate the community on tax dollar allocations and how the budget works. So on the screen there, you'll see a couple of examples of our social media posts, which have already started running. And these are both educational about, actually some of those quotes we pulled from the budget engagement survey, which I believe Sruthi will be talking at the end of the presentation, but some of those quotes were taken from that survey from last year. So we tried to pull out some of those sort of mis or disinformation pieces to try and course correct and educate the community on how the budget works and where allocation is, and then also on the strong mayor powers. As usual, we created a budget engagement page. So on that page, there's lots of information about how the budget works, tax allocations, and also where the documents can be found for the public to go and review the draft budget documents. And also there's a comment form. And I don't know if Sruthi's speaking to this, but I know there have been comments already submitted for consideration by council and staff members. You should have received that email. Hopefully you have. Okay, good. So that'll be folded in as well. On that page, we also, if you recall, last year we created what we call a digital dialogue. It's sort of a podcast type conversation that you can listen to, and it's very sort of accessible and a little easier just to understand a topic in this format we're finding. So we created one on the infrastructure asset management plan and the funding gap. It's only about 11 minutes, so we made this one a little bit shorter, which I know is still a bit long, but if you're thinking of it as a podcast, it's a little bit shorter. And hopefully you've had a chance to listen, but if not, I encourage you to do that. It's right on that page at engage.porthope.ca. And then finally, just some other examples of some of the communications that we've put out in November and December that speak to the budget engagement process over the last couple of months. And finally, just the communications post-adoption plan. So we'll be using all of the tools in our tool belt as usual. When the budget is released, we'll be updating our website and our engagement page. We'll be putting information on social media in the Mayor's Corner and the Council e-newsletter, providing Council with a backgrounder with key messages about the budget so that when you're chatting with your constituents, you have a quick reference. Is there any questions at this stage? Perfect, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. It's always helpful when we're knee-deep in the budget that you're keeping your eye on the communications and keeping the public updated. So moving on to a comparators section. I'm going to try not to spend too much time on this, but it was a council favorite 2 years ago. And so we have some updated information to go through and share. And it really is excellent context in terms of the budget and then ultimately the impact of the taxpayer, I think, as well. So this is really conducted by, it's the BMA study, it's from a third party. The comparators that we're going to look at will identify Port Hope. And the comparator group is made up of 28 other lower tiers. It's not everyone because it's only those who actually participate in this study. But they're all from 15 to 30,000 population, lower tier specific. So this includes places like Collingwood, Bracebridge, Middlesex Centre, North Grenville, Niagara-on-the-Lake, Port Colborne, Saugeen Shores, Scugog, and Tillsonburg as a sample. So as we go through these, just to set a bit of context, the top bar is always going to be the minimum in gray. Then you'll see Port Hope in green. The median is in blue. And then at the bottom in that purple maroon color is the maximum. So to start off, you can see that our population at just over 18,000 is lower than the median of the comparator group. But our land area is actually slightly larger. So what this means then when you look at the population density is that we have a lower density, and that's important because it impacts, right, the share each of our taxpayers pays for the cost of service, the large area that we do cover. And then you can see that our recent population increase is also lower, quite a bit lower than the median. And we have, we see that on the tax base, we see that on the population side over the past few years. Obviously, we are posed to have that change significantly, which is one of the challenges, right, as we go through this budget. But that part's really important because when we talk about the share and that density part, right, the population increase or the growth, not necessarily population, but also say in commercial and industrial or the business side, that is kind of what slows down our ability to mitigate the impacts to, say, the residential taxpayer, right? And find more efficiencies among a larger tax base. So the next two slides, this is really looking through the 7 components that make up our tax base. So residential, we are pretty much the same. On the multi-residential side, we are higher, and that is obviously a plus, right? That may not be top of mind, I would think, for most of us, but we do have a higher property value that's multi-residential than many municipalities within our comparator group. Also positives is looking to see that both commercial and industrial is actually higher than the median. So that is really, really positive. And those two property types actually pay a higher tax rate. So this then contributes to reducing the residential share of the levy overall. So as we grow, right, it's important, we're in a good spot looking, at, compared to these comparators on a commercial industrial side. It's important that as we grow, that we focus on maintaining and if not improving that split overall assessment. I'm not going to spend really any time on pipelines. It's pretty minor. Farmland is pretty similar. And interestingly, although the scale of this is less than 1%, but it is interesting to see that our forest land, our assessed forest land, is actually much, much higher. In fact, it is the maximum of the entire, I think I said 28 comparator groups. So for an area of interest near and dear to this community, that's a good sign. So overall, we take the assessment. I'm not going to get into the impact of the tax ratios, but we end up with the overall weighted assessment, which essentially is the basis for allocating out the tax levy. And you can see, right, that we do have an overall lower tax base than the median. And then on the lower slide is looking at the total net levy. So this is the one element that does pull in the upper tier elements to make it more of an equal comparison, because there's different services provided at upper and level throughout Ontario. And so you can see that our combined net levy is somewhat higher than the median. The upper slide, or the upper chart, identifies here how much, what is the calculation of our used asset life, right? So 46% of our overall asset life has been used. It really means, put another way, is that we have 54%, say, of our asset life cumulatively remaining. So, which is, ours are a little, a little more utilized, right? A little longer in their lifespan than, say, our medians. We're certainly right in the middle of the pack. But that is something when we look at our infrastructure and investment that is important to be able to maintain. Then we have our tax discretionary reserves as a percent of our own source revenues. And this, you can see, is quite high, right? But if we recall, we have two over $10 million funds now for LRW. That's fairly unique for a community. And so that is the main driver that is pushing this part higher. Now as I switch over looking at debt. So on the upper left, we're looking at tax-related debt. And the last tax-related debt that we took out was in 2015, both for the police station and for the Jack Burger. And we've really, at that time, we really had a strategy after that of putting a hold on our debt levels. We're quite reasonable, I would say, but we're higher than what we had identified in the strategic plan at that time. And we had a lot of previous, what I call historical debt of back in the days where we go and you know, we'd purchase a fire truck, you know, and we'd debenture it because we didn't have adequate levels of infrastructure funding. And so we're going through a process now of allowing that to paying those off and closing those. And it's nice, really nice to see now that the tax-related debt is actually lower than the median. That gives us more options and opportunity for in the future. We have some large projects coming up, and we want to pick the timing when you know, when interest rates are low and we have a large project and it makes sense to take out debt. You will recall that over the past, you know, few years, you know, we've done the entire Walton Street reconstruction without taking on more debt. And part of that was through infrastructure investment and funding through the levy, and part of that was utilizing the hydro reserve. But it didn't make a lot of sense in post-COVID high interest rate time. While we had a large project, it wasn't advantageous economically, right, to take out debt at that point in time. So we've done quite well. And this is providing us some options going forward in the future. Now, when you look at our total debt outstanding per capita, it is actually higher than the median. And the main driver of this is our wastewater treatment plant, right, which was a large debenture. Other municipalities who, you know, didn't have to create a whole new plant, you know, in more recent years wouldn't have this from a comparison standpoint. And that debenture we pay off, I believe, in 2051. So it will be, you know, it will be coming down, but it's going to be with us for a while. And then overall, we've talked about reserves, talked about debt. So this is the bottom slide is the debt to reserve ratio. It really is telling us that we have 77 cents of debt for every dollar we have in reserves. Okay. So I've moved through that fairly quickly. Obviously, I don't want this to be, you know, a presentation all about the competitors. So there's many other areas, but I think it's some helpful context as we go forward on kind of where we are at overall. Awesome. You need to take a break before I do all of operating. Keep going. Okay. I was just saying, Mr. Chair, I think we're just at 10. So the next section is operating. It'll be a little bit longer, but I'm gonna carry on. And if it feels like it's a little too long, we need to take a break. If I could ask you, just let me know, okay? All right. So moving into the operating budget, as Shruti mentioned, you know, the strategic plan was a very key driver for this budget. And so where in the past we have, you know, started and talked about the strategic plan and the elements that kind of relate to it, and then moved on to talking about, you know, kind of more the fulsome budget, you're going to see as I move on to our first slide is that we're really integrating the strategic plan throughout the whole budget presentation, and I'm really, really happy with that, that format. So as we move through here, we'll start looking at the inclusive initiatives. The first being we have the official plan review, which I know we're all excited to get into. Waterfront trail upgrades that we do have a pending grant request out for. Strategic community initiatives, we're going to talk about that later on in the presentation. And moving to a full-time special events assistant as we are continuing to grow in that area. Moving on to innovative. We have some funds in for investing in a centralized customer service technology. It's going to be a key initiative of 2026. Having a manager of special projects, so that's on the PHI environmental side. Manager of strategic implementation and business optimization, which will be tied to things on the innovative and moving us forward with technology, moving us forward to the more of that customer service model. A digital twin and GIS service improvement. So this is becoming an evolving tool that we're using both internally, but is also going to be very important for us to be able to support growth. an HR generalist, as we need more support on the HR side, as we're moving more focus on health and safety, we're moving more focus on payroll being part of that team. They do need some additional capacity. Going through for council and non-union and doing a compensation review and being able to start the implementation of that as well. And finally, GovAI software license, which is an AI, it's AI, but it's specific for government so that there's some controls in place so that our information, if we're putting it in, isn't going out into the universe. And also, if something were to accidentally be put into the system, there are controls in place that would then flag and be able to prevent that. So it's a great tool, and it's really great to see some of our staff using it and starting to see, exactly how it can support their work and improve some efficiency. So, over $1.5 million on that slide, and then we'll move to our other two pillars. Starting with our business retention and expansion program. And I was just talking about the importance of commercial and industrial as part of our tax base. So that is here, and the team is working on actually being able to get grant funding to support that. Strategic initiative and special projects position. We're already seeing the benefits of that in terms of the OPG project. Development and infrastructure and engineer, economic development officer, senior planner. I'm not going to speak to each of these, but they're the theme in terms of the economic and the growth readiness side, obviously, which continues with employment land strategy, destination marketing, investments, moving our grant facilitator from part and creating a full-time role. And then a legal clerk to assist, especially we have a lot of land items that come through, and for several years we've been talking about needing to have some resources there to be able to help manage those. So that's our prosperous section at $1 million just for that section, and then moving on to sustainable. We have dig and go remediation, so that's done heavily in conjunction and funded by PHAI. The manager of environmental strategy, as I said, is we are working, and facilitating the PHAI cleanup more and more, needing some resources to be able to coordinate that. The floodplain mapping and the sub-watershed study, having those in the budget. As you know, we put floodplain mapping, but it was for we anticipated a partial year. Then all of a sudden we got the grant, and for 2025, right, we were underfunded on that item basis. So getting the funding was going to be required to see those programs through. A marina business plan and a parks and playground plan, interior lighting at the library, Station 1 bunker gear racking that is part of that, and then the lithium-ion firefighting equipment, so things that are moving forward the fire master plan. Storm system operating and maintenance manual development. I know legislatively there are new requirements and they're going forward for storm, which is driving some change within our organization, which really are good examples of nothing's changed. No, we still have the same stormwater system that we had before, but legislatively, right, we have more requirements to be able to maintain and to go through. So it is changing, and there's a higher cost to be able to maintain those same services, even though to the taxpayer, they look the same. And then finally, inspection of our sand dome, all as part of our sustainable pillar at $1.5 million. So moving into our utilities. So we have 6 additional projects, operating from the utilities side. We have right now, so the Walton Street Emergency Bridge and pipe repair and restoration. So right now we have in the budget $100,000, okay? And I just make reference to that because we're going to come back to that later on when we talk about the capital side. At this point, this is a provision in for repair. A utility rate study, which we're very much looking forward to getting much needed. We have the SCADA, the computerized system, running our plants, doing the necessary IT security assessment and testing for it. 5-year condition assessments for the water treatment plant as well as for the Jocelyn Street pumping station, and updating the wastewater collection hydraulic model. So this area really hitting on the innovative and sustainable pillars. So then moving forward, looking at our utility highlights, and I just spoke about the need to go in and update our utility rate study. We are maintaining the current rates within there's a 10-year plan, but we're now at the point where we're at we've passed the 5-year mark, so we're overdue for going through and updating that. We are identifying from that plan, right? The one main change and why I want to highlight here is having our wastewater consumptive rate increase, right? Holding it at 11%. This is aligned to what we did in 2025, right? The rate study started to see this coming down, but there are some significant concerns around that, which I'll touch base on in a minute. And then maintaining the water rate increase consumptive at the 3.5. So it is lower to help balance. Our base rates are maintaining at lower percent increases relating to the study. But the important part here is recognizing that the rate study was developed in 2019, right, prior to significant post-COVID inflation. This caused supply chain disruptions, which resulted in higher costs, right, and longer project timelines. It really increased material prices, the cost of external labor, our energy costs. We ended up with lower than projected consumption occurring in the rate study. We have our reserve funds, right, were supposed to be increasing, recovering, but because of the situation that we have been in, we're actually seeing them have been trending downwards. On the wastewater side, we saw a significant increase in our biosolids disposal cost due to the closure of the facility that we had been utilizing. As you know, the growth and the resulting development charges and the consumptive revenue that we were expecting to come from increased development, more people using, right, has not materialized and significantly lower than what was in the study. And so at least I will say, shining a bright light is that the conditions above are going to be improved by the replacement of our aging water meters with that capital replacement program that we have gone through, right? So as they're more accurately calculating the amount of usage, right, that will help us capture a little bit more revenue because we're actually capturing all of the usage that goes through the system. So significant challenges here, which is why it didn't seem financially responsible to then see our wastewater rate being reduced. So we want to maintain that with the intent that when we then go to do the rate study, that we can have things be any further increases be more mitigated, as opposed to seeing a reduction in the rate just to turn around and do the study and say like, oh, surprise, we've had all of these challenges and we shouldn't have reduced the rate. So we're just trying to be practical on that front. So just before I move off from utilities, I do want to note, so we would come forward following the budget with a bylaw, just like we do for taxes, but we would be bringing forward an update for the rates following the budget. Moving now to the operating impacts of our boards, just some highlights. So as Shruti mentioned, these have all been presented. But what I did want is to make sure council was aware of adjustments since those presentations. So on the police side, we have worked with the chief of police. He had made reference to the fact that we were doing some secondment of officers There was the potential, I believe, when they came and presented of an additional secondment. That is now moving well through fruition, and so was advised by the police service and adjusted the budget with an additional $72,000 reduction based on that other secondment. The other change is that we have now received the actual billing statement for the OPP, and so we have adjusted the budget by reducing it $163,000 based on that billing statement. So this now brings them to a revised budget increase of $391,000. Looking at the library, there was $7,000 in minor adjustments. So we're not going to go through the adjustments, but I do want to make you aware in case you're kind of looking at previous and now. So they arrive at a budget increase of $71,000. The HBIA is bringing forward a 5% levy increase that has been approved by their membership. It is a $5,000 of their overall budget is unfunded, but I do want to point out they have prior year surplus, so that is absolutely okay as long as that doesn't continue to a point where they have used up their surplus. So now, want to bring to council's attention, items that were deferred or reduced through the budget. And these are the main ones, right? As we talk about, well, what did we reduce? So I always say it's kind of impossible to come out with the full list, because if it's a challenging budget year, if we've got a new strategic plan and there's things we need to provide for, it's not the year that you come forward with like the full wish list for for each of the service divisions, right? So there's already restraint when you put your budget together. There's items that don't even make the list that we could then track them coming off of the list, right? Then there are many things, right? We spend a lot of time through this budget, especially on the base budget, going through, we had the pressures, right? Like we talked last year, we had over $300,000 in that salary gapping we've now phased out. Many pressures throughout the budget that are pushing our base up, and then trying to mitigate that. What we've put together is a list of the ones we think is more important for council to be aware of for clarity and consideration. So one is the service delivery review, which we recognize is important, very much would like to do. Two things, there's capacity aspect and also a cost impact. So this isn't a not to do, this is simply a deferral of doing with the plan right now of 2027. Positive good things like improving our security and actually having a swipe card system for facilities like Town Hall, but not an absolute need for 2026, so it hasn't been included at this point in time. An innovation event, and we'll have a slide coming shortly. So we've pulled $15,000 for that, but just hold that note for a little while longer. I'll come back to it. Heritage guidelines update, so currently not included. There are some alignment of that, say with things like the official plan as well as capacity when we think about the planning team. It's one thing to come up with the funds for it, which is a challenge, but also then on the internal resources, right? Moving forward on the affordable housing CIP, so these funds would be more so in the development aspect of it. I do know that our team right now wants to get in and revisit. We have quite a bit of new staffing in that team. Revisit, get in, understand our current CIP for the downtown. Get in and focus on that as a start. There's a lot of other things going on from a capacity standpoint. The other thing is affordable housing CIP is going to require a lot more investment than the downtown revitalization will. And so it isn't just about putting the money in and having a consultant, put together an affordable housing CIP, right? That's great. Even having a consultant do it, I can tell you from experience, it still requires numerous hours of, existing staff time. But once we actually establish a CIP, we need to be positioned before we just create one on the actual funding to be able to implement it, right? Because right now in the downtown CIP, we're looking at about $100,000 a year, right? When you're looking at doing affordable housing, $100,000 a year isn't going to get us, where we want to, it's not going to give us the impact that we want to have from an affordable housing CIP. So it's not just about, there's the capacity to be able to create the CIP, but then we also need to be in a position to be able to fund it so that we are utilizing it and it actually becomes a strategic driver. Community initiatives funding. Through that overall envelope, we have reduced that by $50,000. Again, I'm going to come to that shortly, but I do want to point out that we have reduced that envelope. We didn't start out that way, but when we kept going through, what can we reduce? What can we reduce? There were a lot of areas that we had to dig into for those reductions. Also looking at a GIS, overall needs assessment and our strategic plan. Big part of this is how are other municipalities, what are the opportunities we have on our GIS side, as we're continuing to develop that. And how can that help in terms of, our economic development side, our planning side, and the overall growth readiness. Funds in for a 25th anniversary event, and also summer students across multiple departments. So we do still have some summer students, but we really had to go through and have a hard look at removing those, which we are going to find a challenge. They do play an important role that helps supplement and do some important things throughout our community. And also, I think, really great to actually have them involved as well. So. But these are the realities of us going through and having to balance things out and be mindful of the impact. So I did want to point, there's a few things, as you'll see as we go through the presentation, that are things that we've discussed that say we're deferred to deliberations through our budget. And so one of those is community care. Transportation, as you recall, we already had a report on this, so I'm going to just touch on the highlights. So we had been providing $9,500 historically through the community grant program. This, if we decide to include it in the budget, would be identified as a special service and charged to the rural area. The original request from Community Care Northumberland was for this funding to get started a rural to urban program. Was established in 2015, really to assist with rural transportation needs. We had done an initial roles pilot program, so some of our internal services, but that was discontinued due to the low demand and as part of our budget review. So we don't know, right? Not funding this doesn't mean that it will stop. It's a contribution to Community Care Northumberland for running that program. But anytime there is a loss, of funding for a program, there is the potential, to reconsider that service. So wanted to touch base on that. Another change is around our community initiatives. So council approved transitioning from a grant-based model to a strategic initiatives-based model, whereby the municipality will seek proposals from local community organizations to advance strategic goals identified in Port Hope's strategic plan. This really had two kind of main components. One was opportunities for our previous foundational funding recipients, but with a different, flavor of tying that to, some service outcomes and some service requirements. So not just providing the funding, but, how are we working with the municipality? How is that going to augment things that the municipality is working on or promoting type thing? And then also funding for proposal opportunities aligned to strategic initiatives. So right now for our three foundational funding recipients, right, being Float Your Fanny, Down the Ganny, Critical Mass, and Capitol Theatre, right, we have $100,000. So I do note that is lower than the envelope, as I mentioned previously, than we had before. We also have, want to do an innovation event, and when we started, we were going to fund the innovation event. as we went through and had to make, cuts, we'd look at, well, where are there other opportunities, right? We, previously, the mayor and Councillor Attridge had organized an AI event, right? They were successful in running that without, an impact to the taxpayer. And so, on a similar, idea is seeking a sponsor, for hosting an innovation event. And then that does maintain $45,000 to be awarded from that proposal process for initiatives that would be related to the strategic plan or otherwise, for the community. Looking overall, we have, our number one funding source for our operating budget at just under half is the levy. But, almost 1/3 is utility rates and user fees. Looking, more closely at our individual, now these are done by departments. It would be too small to try and fit all of the service areas on there. But, the 25% of the overall expenses pertain to policing or community safety. Then we have the works and engineering, which obviously, heavily includes roads. And then our parks, recreation, culture. And I do want to point out also facilities, because that isn't limited to like the Jack Berger and the Town Park Rec Center. That also includes costs of maintaining the facility that we're in. So general facilities as well. Now, this is what we've shown and looked at it in the past. So I'm excited to trial a bit of a new and a bit of a different look, as we want to be moving more towards looking at costs for services. Okay, so I'm going to give you a bit of context for this. So this isn't. First off, this isn't everything. These are, common services more relatable to, to the public, the ones we typically think of in terms of the, in terms of services that the municipality provides, right? Now, the sheer length of the bar, right, is indicative of the overall expenses, right? So you can see that very quickly. As we go through. And then I do want to point out, right, so we've pulled this information from the divisions within each budget, okay? That means there's no allocation of overhead, costs, administrative support. One division may have, a manager in it, the next one may not, so that we haven't gone through and allocated everything else. So this is not a true cost, right, of each of the services. But I do believe, nor does it include any capital costs. So for example, right, you see rural roads, that doesn't include, right, the $700,000 investment in just rural roads resurfacing, okay? So, but when we just look at the operating budget, right, kind of at a high level, I do think it paints a really good picture, both of where the expenses are, but then the second element of this becomes, where are we recovering those expenses through user fees, right? And other funding sources. And we talked previously as we were doing user fees a little bit about, about that and the impact of it. And you can see areas, right, like parking and bylaw where, we are covered, through user fees, or water and wastewater, right? Significant expense there, but covered through user fees. Now that isn't always, not all services have the same ability to recover, through user fees. But I do think this really helps, identify kind of that breakdown. And the second part of that is when we think about levy, right? There's kind of every year, when we're at this table, at this juncture, looking at the budget, there's things that we want to do, we want to maintain, we want to improve services, we've got special initiatives we want to do, but then we're also mindful of the impact of the taxpayers. We inevitably, it's like, well, where can we reduce the levy? If you look at the light blue, right? This is a really good indicator of, what is being levy funded, right? Because, for example, going through and cutting, say, in parking and bylaw or, building inspection, not driving any levy changes, right? So this is helpful, I think, both in where might we want to be able to increase their user fees to have more recovery, recognizing that unless we're going to start having, gates and transponders, that's not going to be possible in roads. So there are very real limitations, but it does help paint a bit of that picture overall. So I'm happy that we created this. I hope that you find it, useful as well. And so at this point, I know I've been talking for a good bit, so I'm ready for a break. We've been at it for about an hour, so I'm going to turn it over to you, Chair, maybe to suggest that we do take a break.
Wonderful, thank you. And thank you so far for this presentation. Yeah, I believe it's a great time to have a break. It's 10:25 right now, so we will come back and reconvene at 10:35 for 10 minutes. Thank you, and welcome back, everyone. So at this point, I'm going to open it up for questions from council, just brief questions. We're not making motions right now. We're just, if you have any questions that are burning right now that you would like to ask staff, this would be the appropriate time to do so. So I will start with Councillor Less.
Thank you, Adam. My question is regarding what was our utilities, wastewater, future study for the planned increase predicated on?
Sorry, can you say that again, Councillor?
Why did we miss the increase in the study? Was the study overambitious? Was the study based on increased housing in Mason Homes? What was it predicated on?
Right. So one of the elements we spoke about was it was predicated on there being more growth, right? So studies like that are tied to the official plan, right? And the official plan, which I believe we have growth allocations that come from the province, right? It was more ambitious than what has actually occurred, right? So that is one challenge. On top of that, we had a lot of those post-COVID-19 additional increases in costs that I spoke about, everything from biosolids to significant inflationary costs for things for infrastructure and for a lot of the work that they do. So we also are seeing reduced consumption. We had talked at one of our quarterly updates on the utility side of having, we have some industrial companies who are significant users, and they are making, instead of us seeing our consumption, generally overall go up, we're actually seeing our consumption go down as they are making, changes to their processes to be more efficient with their water use. So there's been a number of factors, right, that have been contributing to that. We're trying to hold the line on everything except for the wastewater, and really holding the wastewater at the same increases we did last year, right? What we're trying to do is not drop it down and then be in a position after we do a rate study to be like, oh, actually that was a mistake and it needs to go higher, to try and be able to, have some more consistency in our rates and just do what is financially prudent now, because it's a very obvious area, right? Before we go in and have the rate study, which will kind of look at everything more holistically and set us on a new plan for our rates.
Thank you, Councillor Less. Mayor Olena.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I had a question around, I really appreciated the comparisons that you put in front of us, Director Baxter. Wondering if we could go back to the pie chart where you presented the percentage of revenue to the municipality that is generated from government grants, and could you give us any indication of how we fare with our comparators in terms of that, because it's such a small percentage of revenue generation for the municipality currently?
So I honestly don't know in terms of in terms of where other municipalities are at, it's certainly something we could try and pull from other municipalities' financial information returns. And, you know, that will vary obviously from year to year as there's different programs in place. So I don't know, but we certainly see there being opportunity. You know, we did our grants report, so we certainly have had a good bit of success, but we do see opportunity, and hence why we want to move to having, you know, revisit the role, have a full-time grant facilitator there to try and take, you know, look at more opportunities for, you know, for grants.
I think it would be really helpful moving forward to actually have some KPIs around what our goal would be, and that would be, you know, possible if we had some comparators to sort of hashtag aspiration towards changing that percentage for the municipality.
I appreciate the input.
Thank you. Anyone else with any questions right now? Yeah. And then I'm going to ask our youth counselor.
Good afternoon. I was just curious about the 71K increase in the library budget, which was presented on slide 26.
So the library budget was previously presented September, October. So it is not top of mind for me, but I can actually share that with you, or it is available. I would have to go back and refresh my mind though on the elements of that, but that's a good question, Leah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you, Leah. And that's information that we can have before the next meeting, is that right? Okay, if we can move.
Sorry, Chair. So the presentation that I'm referring to is already, it's already posted.
Oh,
both
okay.
on the engagement budget website as well as through our previous agendas. So so it is there. I'm sorry, I don't have the top 3 highlights, whatever, right off the top of my head. So for the interest of time, but I can also just give Leah a quick copy of it.
That's appreciated. Yep, thank you. Okay, are you ready to, if we have no other questions, oh, sorry, Councillor Les, go ahead.
Just one other thought. I wouldn't mind seeing the current org chart for the departments compared to our anticipated new org chart with all the potential new hires. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Thanks, Les. Okay, moving on, let's continue on with the presentation.
Thank you. Sorry, next we're going to be moving into capital. So I'm going to ask Jeremy, our manager of asset management planning and GIS, to kick that section off.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Happy to be up here with you guys again. If we could move on to, oh, can I have the slide? I'd first like to present a slide that we present pretty much every time we talk about asset management or finance. This slide here, if I could go over it quickly, identifies what our infrastructure gap is. The large gray area at the top represents the average annual requirement to maintain levels of service, maintain our infrastructure in a positive way. The orange area represents inflation over the past 10 years. The blue bars represent our capital investment in infrastructure over the same time period. And the green bar atop the 2026 bar would represent the increase in capital spending proposed in 2026. This proposed increase represents the equivalent of 2% of a tax levy increase, although as mentioned previously, some of our proposed capital expenditure comes from alternative sources. What I would like to really highlight on this slide is the progression that Council has made over the past 4 years. In the bottom right-hand corner, you see us moving within this term of Council from 26% of funded within our asset management plan to 36.8% should the proposed capital plan be approved. That represents a 5.5% increase year over year. Alternatively, should we not move forward with that increase in capital expenditure, it would actually decrease our overall funded asset management plan from 31.3% down to 30.7%. I think it is very, very important to note the gains that we've made over the past 10 years when referring to our funded asset management plan. Starting in 2017, we were around 18%, and now we're around 37%, which is very significant gains over that time period. The increase to capital expenditure proposed in 2026 is around $888,000. Within this list that you have in front of you, which I'll only touch on briefly, is essentially the projects that would go forward. These are some of the more low priority projects identified within our asset management team during the capital planning process. These projects were sort of at the lower end of the importance scale. And these are the projects that would be going forward in the event that the capital increases move forward. One of the important notes I wanted to touch on for 2026 is essentially how we changed our capital budget process this year for prioritizing projects that are being presented to council today, and how we got to them. Essentially what we did was we created a multi-criteria decision model, which allowed the asset management team to rank the projects in priority based on a number of key criteria. Each one of these criteria subsequently has its own rubric behind it, which we won't be getting into today. The bars on the right-hand side represent the top 5 projects and how they align with asset management planning. There were 9 key criteria, 2 of which are aligned with asset management planning, and the remaining 7 align with other very relevant factors when determining the priority of a capital project. The first 2 are asset condition and risk and service level impact. Each one of these criteria also has a weight behind it. The first 2 are heavily weighted in terms of their project priority. So what we're seeing on the right-hand side here is how aligned projects are with asset management planning versus how much of their importance is being driven through other relevant factors. So we're looking at the top 5 projects here. We have server and stand replacement, which is the maximum amount because of the way that the system is weighted, is around 2.3 of the total 5 score. So it's a maximum alignment with our asset management planning. Along with the East Beach reconstruction, Mill Street sanitary sewer replacements, the Toronto Road water main, and the town hall remediation. Another change we wanted to make this year is determining a way to better provide a categorization to carry forward projects. Instead of coming to council and saying, hey, we have 40 projects that we need to move forward with from the previous year, we wanted to help provide some context to it so that we could better have an understanding of department capability or capacity to move forward with projects we're recommending this year, as well as continuing projects that we have from previous years. So in this instance, we have 15 projects that are dependent on external factors, and that could be another vendor or a construction organization that we're waiting on. MPH dependency, which would be internal dependency. We're waiting on our own teams to finish projects. There's future project dependency, which would be something that would, a capital project that was proposed in the past and approved. Plans have changed, and now it only makes sense to complete that project with another project that may provide some projects. Synergy, thank you. Then we have phase projects. If a project that you could look at like that would be Walton Street. Walton Street, we can't capitalize that until all 3 phases are completed. Project design, which when a project design is put forward through the capital budget, it's not capitalized until the construction project is completed. And I removed the water tower from this as well because I didn't want the MPH dependency to look like it was the single largest bucket, because the water tower is a much more large and complex project than simply categorizing it in these means. And I believe I'll be passing it over to Shruti now.
So the slides that Jeremy just went through kind of give us a little bit of context for where we're starting off before we actually get into the budget process. And again, before we start talking about the additions that we're requesting for the current year, I just wanted to note the two items that were pre-approved for the budget already in 2025. So the refrigeration plant was approved as part of the 2025 budget due to the longer lead time. And then through the year in 2025, staff came out with a report for additional funding for the Rural Roads Office, so that has been now incorporated into the 2026 budget as well. So the first slide here details all of the projects, MPH-specific projects. So we'll look at utilities and the board separately. So MPH-specific projects that align with the strat plan. So I won't go through every single one, but I will highlight a few of them. So the Toronto Road water main is the replacement and also upsizing of infrastructure to accommodate for growth. Victoria Street reconstruction is a reconstruction, but also an upgrade to a collector-sized road to accommodate for growth. The Marsh Street stormwater improvements is also an upgrade to a currently non-working sump pump in a catch basin at El Dorado Place, I believe, and it's being upgraded to a lift station and oil grid separator. There's three items on here, being the East Beach reconstruction, Optimus Park, and Town Hall, that are all projects in collaboration with CNL. The East Beach reconstruction specifically, that amount is for just the design portion of a multi-year project, of which over half of that design is being funded through CNL. So this is just a municipal portion that's on there. The multi-sport pad is entirely funded through the OTF grant. And we have the Fire Station 2, we're starting some work on it. This is not the full construction of the fire station, but it's the construction of the driveway access on Pemberton in order to be able to facilitate some of that construction. And then finally, as I've highlighted in the previous slide, the Rural Roads Office Space additional funding. So that gets us to a total of $0.1 million in the innovative pillar and $16.3 million under the sustainable pillar. And as I mentioned a little earlier in the presentation, this does not mean that these capital projects won't span across multiple pillars. It just is the one that it most relates to. Here are some of the more general projects that weren't very easily identifiable under one specific strategic pillar or weren't strongly correlated to one. Again, I'm not going to go through every single item, but I will go through a few highlights. The Mill Street sanitary sewer replacement is specifically for just the design and EA component. Barrett Street pedestrian bridge, the 100Ks for the removal of that. The Town Park generator for $360,000. This was one that was rated higher in our asset management criteria because the TPRC is an emergency evacuation center, so it is vital that it has a generator in that location. The pre-approved refrigeration plant item is also on here. And then we have our $700,000 towards our annual rural roads resurfacing. These are all the utilities projects that are coming through of, I think there's 8 projects. One of them has been classified as a strategic plan item, being the Victoria Street Booster Station building upgrades for $90,000 under the sustainable pillar. The rest of the items are just being classified as general. The largest item there you'll see is the wastewater garage, which is to facilitate for storage of vehicles, tools and equipment and materials, and also frees up some space in the actual treatment plant for the storage of biosolids. This is a listing of the police projects that were presented at the council meeting, I believe, in October and then again in November. All of the items here are being funded through the police reserve. The only change here, as mentioned earlier, would be the removal of the capital contingency of 100K. This is just because it is inconsistent with our municipal practice. We don't usually budget for capital contingencies as it creates an administrative challenge. And funding can always be requested throughout the year through council reports. So in summary, as Jeremy mentioned, we started off with 40 carry forward projects, and we had 10 additional strat plan project items and another 35 general projects. There were additional funds requested for existing projects as mentioned, so whether that is just additional funding because the costs have increased, scope has changed, but also additional funding in the sense of there was a design that was done in a previous year, and this year we're asking for some construction funds. So you'll see the number of projects in there, but they will not be added to the count just because they're already included in the carry forward. So that brings us to a total count of 45 projects for 2026 at 22.9 million in cost. Okay. There are a few items, a few projects for consideration. We have not included them in the budget as of yet, as we are waiting for some confirmation of some information before we're able to actually incorporate them into the budget. But we wanted to bring this to your attention so you have some awareness before the official request comes through for inclusion in the budget. So the first one is the water tower, the elevated tank. So we are pending some confirmation from external funding sources. The Walton Street Water Main and Bridge, as you all know, there was a failure over the holidays. So the team is now exploring replacement options, which can range anywhere from $50K to $2 million. The options being to reconnect as is, reline the water main and then reconnect, abandon the water main and leave it as two dead ends, install a new small diameter heat trace water main under the bridge to maintain the water quality, and the last one is to just leave it disconnected and do nothing. So once the water model has been explored, we'll pick one of these options and then recommend for inclusion in the budget. And then finally, we have the GRCA dam, and again, we're still pending some confirmation from both internal and external sources with this regard. The two options that were presented prior were a repair or a decommissioning. The repair would cost $37,500 in the current budget year, which is the 2026 budget year, and a decommissioning would cost twice that amount. This is a list of all of the capital deferred items from our budget prioritization process. So they were deferred for various reasons. Some of them, again, to align with other projects, and some of them were just not weighted as heavily from an asset management or the other factors that Jeremy would have presented in a previous slide. This breaks down our capital funding by source. So you'll see that a large portion of it is coming from other funding, and a majority of this is the PHAI projects for East Beach, Optimist, and Town Hall. A lot of the government grants are coming from our CCBF, federal tax, provincial gas tax, as well as OSIF, and the OTF grant for the multi-sport pad. From a levy impacted expense perspective, the largest projects are usually and generally always from Works and Engineering, which is what is reflected here, followed by Parks and Recreation, Fire and Emergency Services. And that is all for the capital section. Yeah. Okay. We'll open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you. Looking at council for any questions, seeing the mayor first, please.
Just a couple of questions, maybe starting with a easier one and then moving up to a little bit more of a challenging one. Just wanted some explanation about the exclusion of Canton Hub AV updates from the list of priorities, given that there was funding that was made available through the AI workshop around, why we couldn't have made some kind of plan for improvement there with those monies as a starting place. And then my second question is around future items for consideration. The the range of 50,000 to 2 million is huge in terms of the water main and the bridge. And so, if we're dealing with those kinds of uncertainties at this point, I'd like to at least have a conversation at some point during the budget of where that money will come from. My preference would be that it wouldn't be put onto the levy, but it would come out of some of our additional flexibility with reserve money. So those are my two questions.
Through you, Chair, to the mayor. As far as the Canton Hub upgrades, the contributions made from the AI workshop, that was directed towards that. But we also went back to, I think, prior budget, in 2025 budget, where it said, for inclusion in the 2026 budget was consideration for turning the Canton Hub into possible site for holding council meetings. So we did that exercise to understand what that cost would be, the practicality, the possibility, the legal requirements if we're able to do it. And I think the capital budget to achieve council's direction of looking at if council meetings could be held at the Canton Hub was in the range of about 125,000, somewhere in that range. That meant extensive furniture. That meant multiple cameras and things like that. We put that in the budget, but we added it to the budget, but did not put it above the line for inclusion because there are other factors that would prevent us from holding council meetings at the Canton Hub, primarily security reasons. We would probably just get council and a few staff in there from a number of people that could be actually sitting in that Canton Hub. So it wasn't a feasible to do that, to hold council there. We did note that we have split out the cost of just doing some very simple upgrades so that we can use it as a space for holding meetings if councillors want to hold a meeting up there and use technology, extra owls, extra TVs, and that was in the range of like $30,000. So our suggestion is for council to not consider having council meetings up there, but reconsidering just using that money strictly for simple upgrades so that that space can be more amenable for small meetings, hybrid meetings that council could use, the public could use, public could join there and join a council meeting remotely from there. And I think that's a suggestion that staff are making is to use that money for that. We're just going back on prior direction and just wanted the clarity on that prior direction. Okay. The second question, yeah, we are so premature in the water main break on that one to really get understanding of that one. Totally agree. We are assessing the different options through Works and Engineering and Water Department, and we will come back with council. We do have other reserves that we could tap into, and we will come back to council to your suggestion, Mayor, not to hit the tax levy. It's not the intent to hit the tax levy because that would impact the capital budget in general as it's being presented right now. So yes, we're looking at alternate options.
Okay, thank you. Is that good for you? Yeah, okay. Vicki?
Thank you. So through the chair, just a comment and a question. So for future considerations, the Canton Dam, I just want to highlight that to get the wiki funding, that has to be submitted by January of this year. If it's not, if the commitment isn't made, the next window is 2 years from now, which would probably bring the construction to 4 years, in which case the dam would not last that long. A conversation I had with the GRCA yesterday, they said that the second option, decommissioning, is actually the preferred and actually the most economical. So I'm just wondering if someone could talk to the GRCA maybe tomorrow and bring back more information for us on Thursday regarding that. They did say that the decommissioning option as well could get funding from organizations such as Ducks Unlimited, Trout Unlimited, Ontario Streams, and so on. And it's also the one that's supported by our Indigenous community. So if we could get more information on that to make a better decision, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Ming. Yeah, I guess that's new information that we didn't hear from the original presentation from GRCA. They gave us the two options. A lot of the expenditure comes out in post, like 2027, post this budget. Like, it's a small nominal amount right now. Even if we move decommissioning, I think it was 37,000. The true hit will happen in 2027 with the 300,000. But we will take that up. We'll reach out to GRCA if they have new information why the preferred route is the decommissioning. And obviously, there's ramifications of that as well from a fire servicing perspective. If they decommission it, there's different routes that we need to do for fire service in the area as well that we would have to explore.
So just to follow up, the discussion I had yesterday would be a revitalization of that area, which could potentially keep our dry well in that location by making secondary ponds in the area. So there is a lot more to discuss there, and it's kind of coming last minute, but the conversation I had yesterday sounded very promising.
Okay. We will follow up for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Less.
Are we drilling down on the capital budget right now, or are we leaving that till Thursday?
More questions right now, if you had anything like looming in your head
General?
right now.
Okay, so a general question would be the town hall remediation of what do we intend to do over what time period? And do we really need to take the financial hit of $3 million this year?
I can speak to that through the chair. This project will be funded 100% through CNL and PHAI with the exception of some minor linear work, and it will be essentially the cost of pipe in the ground. So I think the impact is somewhere in the $150,000 to $170,000 to utility rates, but we won't bear a significant cost. It is part of the PHAI cleanup to remediate town hall. Timeline is to get in and out this year, while being mindful not to affect the area during peak tour season. So to be mindful of that, but there is ongoing LLRW cleanup in the municipality, and this was identified as a priority from staff. There's an opportunity to get in, get it done, and get it out with minimal impact. And if we do it through the CMP program under our license as opposed to CNL, our impact will be an order of magnitude less than if CNL does it. They have a very large footprint when they come to work.
Councillor Attridge.
Thank you. My question is about the Barrett Street pedestrian bridge. I'm curious whether or not we looked at other options where we simply just put a gate on either side of it to prevent people from crossing it, a less expensive option, and remove it at a later date.
So through the chair, we can certainly fence it at this time if there is a want to defer that project. However, there will come a time when it does need to be removed.
Thank you. Councillor Thoms.
My question is around the East Town Line culvert replacement. With that being right on the boundary, is there any cost savings with Clarington?
Through the chair, that it's 50% cost share between Clarington and Port Hope. So the 150,000 is Port Hope's share. The total cost is 300,000, with 50% to Clarington.
Councillor Less.
With the thought that we haven't been fully funded on the new fire station project, or I don't know what the status is, are we premature in thinking of putting another road through at this stage?
Thank you, and through the chair, this is phase one of the project, so the design, which hasn't been finalized because of potential OPG impacts on the design of the requirements for the fire hall, the secondary means of egress and entrance into the police station is something that's going to be required whatever we end up putting in at that location. So that's going to allow us to put in the entrance, and then in 2027 look at what we're going to be building on the north side of the police station so we can ensure continuity of operations for the police while construction is happening on the north side. So it's the minimal amount of work so we can start the process in the years to come. It doesn't matter what we build there, the entranceway has to go in.
Thank you, and thank you for that answer. And I just have a quick follow-up on that. Do we know the status of the grant currently?
Through the chair, I have not heard anything back in relation to our grant application for the construction of the fire hall as of yet.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Clare.
Yeah, I know they're fairly minor amounts in the actual budget, but I did notice that we have some money for both furnace replacements as well as heat pump replacements. And I was curious, just in the budgeting process, given that we have a corporate greenhouse gas reduction strategy, or corporate plan in place, as well as a community climate action plan, which both recommend electrification, I'm wondering how those recommendations are considered in the decision about whether to start the retrofit into electrification of municipal buildings or to replace like for like with gas-powered HVAC systems.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair. The items that have been identified were an emergency replacement for Town Hall specifically. So we did not go through the process of reviewing heat pump opportunities for Town Hall, also because there are 6 furnaces. So related to the emergence of that replacement requirement, the hub is a heat pump opportunity. So we are also reviewing opportunities for a full HVAC review related to all of the facilities in the corporation about what some future opportunities would be with that. Also preparing and aligning with grant opportunities related to that. So I'll say we're in the midst of working through what that opportunity is. Some are more urgent than others, and we don't have the opportunity to review the full service for Town Hall specifically.
Wonderful. Les?
Yeah, just something for Thursday's meeting regarding the cameras for the snow plows, which I totally agree with. I would like to know what the value added of the extra $10,000 a year is for the ongoing support on a monthly basis of each of those cameras, and whether we really require that when we have the cameras recording what we need anyways. But that's a discussion for perhaps Thursday.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other questions from council? Seeing none. Our youth councillor, is there any questions that you have? No? Okay, then it'd be wonderful to move on to the budget summary.
All right, thank you, Chair. So we'll walk through. So this is kind of our consolidated view by department. Really want to point out 2 changes we've made for this year. So first, you can see the top line is non-departmental, and that previously had all of our infrastructure in it. And so we've separated that out. It's a significant, it's a significant cost amount, but also just to separate that out so that you can actually see it. So when at the end, when you look at this and you look at the capital summary, you know that those costs are actually included, in terms of the summary. And then the other part really to point out is you can see now we actually have, just below the police line, we actually have the LLRW interest included there, actually as part of the budget this year, and I will be speaking to that just in a moment. So those are the 2 main changes overall. The total levy requirement is increasing almost $1.5 million this year. So we're now just over 31 million coming from levy. So the LLRW fund interest application. So first and foremost, I want to emphasize we are continuing to use the LLRW funds interest to reduce property taxes on an area-specific basis, right? It's just the method in which we're doing that, right, is changing to essentially improve our compliance. So only special services can be allocated on an area-specific basis for property taxes. And you may recall earlier, there's something we've come around before. It came up last spring as we were talking to Municipal Tax Equity, and they did our 25-year tax review. That we can't take a revenue through our provincial budgeting framework. We can't take a revenue and attribute it to a certain area. You can take certain services and the cost of those services and attribute that to a specific area. So we need to kind of tie our LRW funds right, to a special service. And the only one that's significant enough and actually impacts both areas is policing. Okay? That's why you see it, kind of in there below. So we also need to include it in the budget, not kind of pass our budget and then include a reduction for LRW as part of doing our rates, right? That will make everything in terms of our reporting and things, more smooth, but it does need to be included in our budget. So in the past when we've modeled this, right, we've put in an estimate or use of prior years in terms of the actual impact of the taxpayer, but it hasn't been in part of our budget. So we are making that improvement and putting that as part of the budget this year. I do note that timing change requires us including an LRW amount before the actuals are known, right? So we normally, we would get, we wouldn't normally know the amount, say, till February, right? By the time we get in and reconcile, or even longer if we have to actually do like our own internal reconciliations of the accounts. So we have included essentially a budget amount that's estimated, our budget amount estimate is the same as last year at this point. Which is consistent with the 80% of net earnings, as per direction. However, when we actually get the actuals, it's not going to be 80% bang on, like we're normally able to do when we are waiting until April and including it, say in May as part of the tax levy. So the impact to the taxpayer is going to be the same, right? It's going to be the same, but we are including it. We are now including it in the budget process, and it is tied to a special service. The other change is around payments in lieu of taxes. So first, what are payments in lieu of taxes? So typically it's for other government-owned properties, right? So there's some technicalities around it, which I won't get into, but that's typically what we're talking about. And it is over $250,000 in terms of where this amount is showing up. So I did want to speak to it and bring it to your attention. Again, the main point is we're continuing to reduce the amount paid for property taxes from other taxpayers using this revenue source, right? It previously was included directly in the budget as a general revenue, okay? Now it's being removed from the budget and included in the tax base, just like all the other, taxpayers, although these ones are a little bit more, we'll call them special taxpayers. So the impact is the same. I do want to point out though, right, when you look at the budget, and I was just talking a minute ago about like the increase in the budget requirement. Well, over $250,000 of that is just from the fact that we've taken this money out of being part of the budget and added it to the tax base. The impact to the taxpayer is exactly the same, okay? There are a few payments in lieu of taxes, right, that we can't have as part of our tax base because we can't apply the normal tax rates to them. There are special rates that are on a linear basis for things like railway lines. So there are some minor payments in lieu of taxes that are still part of the budget. Just it's not interesting, but I do want to just be transparent about that. We're not taking all of them, but we're taking all the ones that we can. Okay, and then that part is important. It does have some slightly different impacts because now it's part of the tax base, so it's part of the urban and part of the rural, tax base. And so we have done that. This has changed over time. It's one of the things we've talked with municipal tax equity when we were kind of doing the review. And it's something that's changed over time. Municipalities are more moving to this and having it be part of that actual tax base. And so we are making that change as well. I will, just as a side note, this was actually also one of the things we had questions around and was really a request from some of those who are coming to council from the rural area is to have these payment in lieu of taxes actually be part of the tax base. So we have done that. All right. So just want to break down a little bit. I've talked about special services, so just want to make sure we maintain that understanding. I know council's been through this a few times, but there's people who'll be looking at this who haven't been necessarily following the budget every year. So first, all of our services are common services unless there's a legislatively supported reason and a determination by council that they become special services. So by default, everything's in common services. Unless we pull them out. So of that, we take that amount and it through the tax process, right, gets allocated out based on the weighted assessment of all the properties within the different areas. So right now, almost 72% of the overall common services is paid for, cumulatively by the urban area, and just over 28% is paid for cumulatively by the rural area. That all, flows through. Everyone pays the same tax rate on that front, okay? When we move to special services, though, that's where the two areas start paying different tax rates. And so what's included in special services, first and most significantly, is police. So the urban area pays for the Port Hope Police Service, and the rural area pays for the OPP contracted service. I will note, if you take this number and try to reconcile it to the police previously, it won't match because the board, right, the board oversees all the services in its common, okay? Then we take the LLRW funds that we are aligning to the police services as a reduction, and we do that on a ward-specific basis based on using generally 80% of the interest that's used or earned on each of the urban and rural funds, respectively. Then we have the costs for urban transit that is charged to the urban area only, as well as Christmas tree pickup. So each of those, we've got 6.9 million for the urban area and almost 300,000 for the rural area. Those costs are charged only to those areas, and that results in a separate tax rate. And individuals will see that separately on their bill. They'll have one line for common services and one line for special services, and this is exactly what makes up those special services, okay? So, now what does that actually end up meaning to our typical residential taxpayer? So for common services, they're paying just over $2,500. That covers most of the requirement. From a special services basis, police is $784, with the reduction then of $69 from LLRW funds. Transit is $47, and then Christmas tree pickup doesn't even work out to a full dollar. Overall, $762. Now, I will note, right, that this is where the bills from the urban and rural tax, payers does vary. This is the overall weighted average. Overall, $3,273, right, is what that typical residential homeowner would pay for the services that are provided through our municipality. This is an increase of $176, which is slightly less than what was incurred last year. If we take that same $176 and look at it, from a monthly basis, it's a $15 increase per month or a $3 increase per week. And when we look at the municipal portion, right, of the total property tax bill, so the full amount that's going to be collected by Port Hope, the typical residential homeowner is paying just under $3,300 per year. That works out to $273 per month for all the services we provide, or $63 on a weekly basis. Okay. All right. Now I am pleased to turn you over now back to our Manager of Financial Planning, Sruthi, who has done a tremendous amount of work for all of this. So she's going to talk next steps and conclude our presentation.
Before moving on, I just see that we have a question from Councillor Lassiere.
I have one question regarding the LLW funds. If there were no more special services in the rural area, how would we allocate those funds?
They would then need to be done on a common basis, because we don't have another source, right? And we don't have another special service to be able to attribute them to.
So I'm sorry, I don't quite follow.
So the only way we're technically allowed to be able to do them on a ward basis, right, is if we are attributing them to a special service. If policing was no longer established as a special service, we wouldn't be able, there's not enough cost, right, from a transit standpoint, certainly not for Christmas tree pickup, to be able to allocate them on a ward, by ward basis.
So would we
So
have
they
to
would-
change our own bylaws?
So they would become common.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and just to that, Councillor Mink also has something with that.
Thank you. So through the chair, at some point through this process, would you have a slide that would show us community care as a special service, what that would look like?
As we go through the process, we can model what that would look like.
That'd be great, thanks.
Okay, go ahead, Susan.
So in terms of next steps, we are now done with the boxes in gray, which is the mayor directed staff to prepare the budget, and today we've presented the budget. The next step would be council recommending changes to the budget to the mayor through motions. So that can occur between today and Thursday. Once that is done, the mayor will then introduce the mayor's proposed budget, slated to be published on January 20th. And then council then has 14 days for amendments. These would be formal amendments coming through the clerk's office. The mayor then has 3 days to veto, and council has 11 days to override. These timeframes were reduced or shortened through a council resolution as well as a mayoral decision. And then the budget will be deemed to be approved after the veto and override period if it exists. Otherwise, it can be deemed approved earlier than that. So in terms of the actual dates, this is what that looks like. So again, today's the January 13th meeting, so by the end of the day, we'll have that completed. And the next meeting on January 15th will be where we can have further discussion as well as address some of those motions. The clerk's office sent out some guidance on how to prepare those motions and some samples for language as well. So just a reminder that if you are able to submit those motions prior to January 15th, that would be appreciated, but you don't have to. You can also initiate motions during that meeting. But again, just to follow the guidelines that the clerk's office has sent out. So from getting to an actual budget number to getting to tax rates, these are the other items that need to be completed for us to be able to actually calculate the final tax rate. So the first one being MPAC finalizing the property tax assessment rule. So that gives us our weighted assessments and things like that, and also our growth numbers. So that has now, we do have that information and has been incorporated into this budget. The next two items are still pending. So the county establishing their 2026 tax ratios as well as their 2026 tax rates. So once those have been finalized, they'll then be incorporated into our final increase. Province finalizing the 2026 education tax rate is now complete and has been incorporated. And then that's when we can, as Port, finalize our Port Hope rates for 2026. If there are no questions with those couple of slides there, I'd like to thank all of the people up there. So the council, youth councillor, the CAO, the budget team, the finance team, SLT, asset management for all of their expertise, their time, numerous discussions, and prioritizing this budget to be able to get it out in such a short time frame. The comms team for ensuring that we're communicating our information effectively and also keeping us all engaged. The clerk's office for running this meeting today and everything process-wise. All of the staff for all of the inputs that they've been providing to their department leads, and also the actual community of Port Hope for their engagement with the budget survey that was done last year, as well as all of the other comments that have come through so far.
Wonderful, thank you. So I'm taking a look at the time right now. So it's 11:32. I don't think that we should really break for lunch until 12 anyways. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up to council for any questions that they may have, and I will start off with the mayor.
Thank you very much. Sruthi, I was wondering if you could just give us a little bit more detail about where county is in at its process, because in hearing the presentation, one would assume that nothing's happened at that table, and we do know that there's at least some early indication of what is going to be the percentage of increase on the tax levy.
All right. And actually, I'm going to take a quick step back. So the county actually previously also had a conversation around the tax ratios and considerations. So we do anticipate the multi-residential has been being phased down. Last year was phased down from 1.6 to 1.4. We just don't know. There was, under a normal course, or the current trajectory would be from 1.4 to 1.2. But then there was some discussion about expediting that and potentially bringing it to zero. So we will await that decision, which won't come for a few months. But what that does, right, is it reduces multi-residential share of the overall tax levy, which is good and supportive, right, for lower income, typically and affordable housing. However, someone has to pay, right? So all the other property, types will, see upward pressure, including residential on that front. From the county tax rate side, so the county has gone through their budget, I understand, and they had a 3.77% tax rate increase is what they have identified at this point. We don't have their actual tax rates, yet, so. Before we, can fully properly model it, we'll need those to be able to kind of communicate out to the public.
Does that answer your question okay? Yeah. Councillor Les.
Yes, this budget is proposing a number of staff hirings. I'd like to know what these individuals will be doing and who's going to be paying the freight on them.
Through you, Chair, I'll take that question. You will see, we have been working significantly behind the scenes to be ready for growth, for nuclear growth, and we've been in a lot of conversations with the ministry, with OPG. They did give us an initial tranche of money last year for $1 million in 2025 to help us get growth ready, and we've continued those negotiations to get further support for growth readiness. The positions that have been put forward have been sort of agreed upon with OPG and the municipality, what we think we need to help them through the impact assessment process. And there will be contributions from OPG in next tranches of growth readiness funding to help support that. So it will not be an impact on the tax levy. Those positions were very strategic to help support the impact assessment growth, but also to help the municipality get ready for growth. Particularly, an engineer, a planner, just on top, an economic developer. So those are some of the key positions that we need to have in place to help be successful implementation of OPG coming in, and also as being ready for generalized growth for municipalities. So those positions were sort of, in my mind, the best business case put forward to help us get ready for growth, and they are not on the tax levy, those new positions.
Okay. Does that answer okay for you, Les?
Partially.
Okay.
Chair?
Mayor.
Just before we move on, if I may. So if there are questions, I'm sorry, CEO spoke about, some of the growth, readiness positions, trying to have growth, fund those. For each of the positions that have been proposed, right, on, posted on the website in the detail, each of the plan requests, if you look to the back, if it's being funded from a non-levy source, that's all been identified, right? So if it's coming from growth, if it's something that's like a PHI reimbursed position, just so you can see it on an individual basis if you want to go through and do that review. And if you've got any questions, I'd be happy to. Okay?
I just want to maybe add a little bit just from my perspective of being at some of the conversations about growth readiness. So I think it goes beyond just being helpful to OPG through the impact assessment. It's about maintaining our autonomy and our self-interest through the process and having the right skill sets and competencies on our side of the team to deal with other sides that are far more well-resourced than we are, right? So it's fundamentally about having a certain standing and a strength for really difficult negotiations and advocacy on behalf of Port Hope. And I would also say that the business case that the CEO presented in terms of some of these positions align not only with in conversation with OPG, but also with the province more generally, and are very much linked to the MOU that we have just agreed to. So they're very closely linked to the kinds of outputs and outcomes that we need to realize, and that they were very, very carefully vetted and negotiated. And in fact, I do want to acknowledge the CAO's role in ensuring that we do have the right people in place to do it, and that we don't burden our current staff with tasks and responsibilities that are just not realistic to be taken on at this point.
Wonderful, thank you. I do have a couple of questions on that as well. So the new positions, who do they report to? Do they report to our current departments? And then if you could just speak to, these are permanent positions. So if in the future we were to lose growth readiness funds, where that would be funded from at that point?
Thank you, Chair. A great question. The reporting structure, it's sort of implicit under each department, so you can see where they will be reporting to. Very specific. You can see the source. See where the funding comes from and where the service level increases are. So you can see that by department. There is direct reporting relationships established. As far as the permanency of those roles, there is probably one contract position that we are working with. The intent is to have full-time permanent positions. The main reason is to get the right people. To the mayor's point, I'm trying to right-size the organization, trying to get the best qualified people that we can into this organization. I can't achieve that with contract positions. Fundamentally, there is, I will call it a very calculated decision to make these permanent positions, and the funding stream that we're looking at is to cover us at least the next 3 years. So it's not like one year we have to keep changing. I was looking for that financial stability and security going forward, because I don't want to hire someone in 1 year and say, you're gone. That's not my position. So we have pretty much decent funding for the next 3 years. We are very, very confident that as this project progresses, there's going to be other streams of funding coming through. Our backstop, we have reserves. We have substantial reserves that we can to help mitigate, get us out of it slowly should something catastrophic happen. But there's also the position I would take is that we've been asked to have these positions fulfilled to support this project. If this project doesn't go through, I'll be asking support to get us out of this project. So there's multiple avenues that we could pursue to mitigate any future risk of taking on full-time employees.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other questions right now? Yeah, Councillor Mink.
Thank you. So I appreciate all these great questions, but mine is a very, very simple question. Going back to, we were talking about the county 3.77. I had this question just last night. Will we be communicating our percentage increase this year rather than the average dollar amount?
So it's always an ongoing, interesting question. So we were asked to, and we did identify kind of on our initial summary slide what that percentage was for awareness. The challenges come in as you've known, we've talked, and I remember, Vicki, you and I sat down with a taxpayer a few years ago now, maybe 2 years ago, and I remember the outcome of that looking at me and saying, like, we need to communicate the percentage once they're the final percentages kind of at the end, right? So we have made reference to it. Based on our practice and the feedback that we've had from this council is not to be necessarily promoting that percentage, point until we get to the final ones, because those numbers will change, right? Even through just the tax ratios, the number we're using today, it will change. but, hopefully not significantly. And last year I think we were within $12, I think. But ultimately that, we take direction from council. So we have included it here. It is there. You're aware of it. We aren't promoting it, throughout for the exact reasons of a few years ago when we had that challenge, right? Of like, well, this is the percentage, and then we had people calculating different percentages on different basis, and then why does it then we kind of think we get that organized, and then, and then it turns around and comes out later on. So at this point, we're continuing to do everything on a total bill basis. So when the taxpayer kind of hears an amount, they don't typically go and look at, start doing math on each line of their bill. More likely they think how much their bill is, and then kind of go, oh, it's gone up by that. And then as we did last year, and we'll talk about the dollars, and then as we did last year when we come forward with the rate, we'll identify what is the overall percentage and how much of that percentage is done by the 3 different levels of government that are on that bill.
Thank you. Councillor Clare.
I have a question. I imagine it's for the CAO about procurement. So I know we got very lucky with the transit buses this time around that were ordered. I think we approved the budget in 2023, but they didn't get ordered until 2025 when Director Davidson took over that department, and we were still able to afford them based on the original budget. I noticed we have a contingency for tariffs now that didn't exist when we approved the original budget. So I know there's been a few times over the last year as well where we've had requests for pre-budget approvals to increase budgets on some capital projects. So I wondered if you could speak to, is there anything we're going to be doing differently, recognizing the volatility of the costs on these capital items, especially around construction, with respect to procurement, so that we can avoid these cost overruns and ensure that the budget as approved is going to be the cost?
Great question. Yeah, we obviously ran that within the last month, these overruns. I will point out, though, that I would say, we were talking about this the other day, the percentage of those projects that come on budget or under are significantly more than the random few that go over, right? I think I want to start off with saying that. We do have a fairly robust procurement process. There are always going to be one-offs. Obviously, the tariffs do cause a bit of challenge. This is where I'm not a fan of building too big of a contingency into an RFP, because all it does is inflate the costs, right? And it makes the RFP a little bit more challenging. I think our big site that we're looking at internally is the original cost estimates that come in, whether it's from an engineering company or whatever it is, to vet those, like a deeper dive on those, just to make sure they make logical sense in case we're missing something. I think that's the big challenge, and have more set of eyes on that to make sure that there's not something that was missed, or or something that we could add in or take out, right? So we are going to have better eyes on it. But there is the contingency piece. We can factor more in. I just hesitate doing that too much on a contingency basis because it just inflates costs unnecessarily. So in general, I would say we are at the mercy of, the economy to some degree, but we have to look at it internally and focus on that and make sure what our consultants are providing us from cost estimates are realistic and rational. And that's what we're going to continue to focus on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I understand the construction piece is a little bit different from, say, something like the transit buses. I look at that line item and think we got really lucky. And I'm not sure, it was surprising to me that we could approve a budget for such a big expense and then they just weren't ordered for like 2 years. It just didn't get around to it. And I understand that was a previous staff members no longer with the organization. But I think I'm looking for some assurance that when we approve the budget for these big capital expenses, we know the prices are going up on most of these things quite significantly year over year. So is there a way to guarantee that those are prioritized in the early months of the year rather than waiting where we may end up with overruns?
Agreed. I totally agree with that for sure.
Given the importance of the LLRW and also just what we talked about, having other reserves that we're now relying on in order not to pass on additional expenditures onto our constituents, Can we get an update on the plan around looking at putting our reserves into a competitive investment vehicle like the one through One Investment that we had made a direction on, I believe it was a number of months ago now?
Yeah, certainly, Madam Mayor. So once we're very much looking forward to having our manager of finance back. Once she's back next month, we will, that's going to be one of the first things we're going to be talking about, looking and doing that. We want to make that change during this term of council as soon as we can, really this year. There are a few things we need to work through and work with, the other organization, but that's definitely a priority this year.
So just quick follow-up. When that happens, would it be possible for the council to get a report to council to show us, on average, how we've done with the investments of our LRW, say, over the last 10 years compared to other potential investment vehicles, including specifically One Investment, and what we might be realizing in terms of additional revenues if we do invest in something other than the vehicles that we've used to date?
So we'll be looking at that in terms of the comparison to make sure that it makes sense, right? If we're going to make a change, to go through and do that comparison.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question. Who's reviewing council remuneration?
Sorry, that is an undertaking that I have taken on in the CIO's office, working with the Human Resources Department, and we have an external consultant working on that, and we'll be bringing that to council next month.
Okay, so I have been let know that our lunch is set and ready right now, so I think it's a good time for us to take a break. We can come back after lunch and we can come right into this conversation again. So we will now recess for 1 hour and we'll come back actually let's do an hour and 10 minutes, come right back at 1 o'clock. All right, well, welcome back, everyone. I believe we are ready to reconvene this special council meeting. So we have had the wonderful opportunity to have a great presentation by staff, and it is now time for council to start working on some business here. So I'm going to open it up to council for any more questions that we have about this staff proposed budget. Councillor Clare.
Hi. I think I'm picking up on a question or a request from Councillor Less earlier this morning around the plan requests for the new staff positions, and whether in preparation for Thursday's discussion, if there could be an organizational chart or some additional details to help us understand where those different staff roles will sit within the existing organization and relate to existing staff roles.
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Clare. Actually, we have our HR team working on that right now. It shouldn't take too long. I'm not sure if it will be ready today, but as soon as it's done, they're going to send it to me to take a look at. So we are working on that org chart with the positions to be added, also showing which ones are impacting the tax levy versus not.
So through you, Chair, as well, we do have one slide with all the positions and the departments that they are reporting through. So we can just pull that up too, or share that, or. Just 1 second, we'll have that up. But through you, Chair, we will provide the org chart, but this is just an indication of where they are reporting through and the structure of their position, their type of position as well.
Sorry, through the chair, just a follow-up question to that, and sort of going to Les's comment earlier that if we don't go ahead with this project as planned, let's just say, and we have these positions, do we have, I see value in having some of these positions and bringing change and growth to our communities in a strategic way. So would there be sort of an alternative path that we could still utilize these individuals for other opportunities within the municipality while the project is coming forward?
So just for clarification, when you say the project, you're talking new nuclear is no longer coming?
Or the timelines have changed or whatever. So we don't just have very qualified idle bodies sitting by, whether we're sitting at the mercy of upper tiers.
So through the chair, yeah, we have significant amount of work in this municipality, and you know what we always. I mean, I've heard in the past capacity have been an issue. So this is the chance and the opportunity to capitalize on these positions to do those game-changing things that we haven't had the opportunity to do before. Even if it's policy adjustments, there's a ton of work that needs to be caught up on in the past. But that being said, I'm pretty confident the project is going through and the work that is ramping up already, we are feeling as staff that we don't have the resources to do it and manage it. So that we 100% need these positions, and we can redeploy people as the project wanes and flows. We definitely have great use for them.
This is, just having this in front of us is really helpful, and I do agree that a more robust visual would be also very helpful. But ultimately, given the levy funding versus money coming out of growth readiness, I don't have any concerns about this, only because I know how hard fought these positions were out of growth readiness monies, and how these were really carefully vetted by OPG in the province. And in fact, I know that the CAO had wanted many more positions than what we've got here. And this, to me, is kind of the minimum that we need to have in place in order not to get bulldozed by this process. And I don't want us to get bulldozed by this process, or to be reactive as opposed to proactive in doing really good planning around this. And I do want to bring back your comments earlier, CAO, that there is a plan B and a plan C, which is there is enough in reserve to give us a comfort zone for this, that we would be seeking some kind of compensation should something go really badly with this project, just as much as we have in the past when certain sales or certain projects didn't go through as planned.
Okay, thank you. It looks like you're working. Okay, moving on to any other council questions right now? Seeing no more, oh, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Clare. Yeah.
This is the time for discussion
Yes,
as well?
please.
Questions
Yes,
for
please.
discussion?
Absolutely.
So I think one of the items in the capital budget that I did think warrants some discussion and consideration with council is the Barrett Street Bridge. This was something that came to us, I think it was 2 years ago in the budget process, and I think there was a budget proposed for the design of a replacement bridge that would ultimately, I think, if my memory serves, I'm looking at the director, cost ultimately to install the new replacement bridge in the amount of about $1 million, so to speak, and we removed that from the budget from the council table 2 years ago. So I appreciate that we're now back again, and that it's now 2 years down the road. But I'm a little concerned of passing the budget and only assuming removal, and not having a solid strategy for how pedestrians are going to safely traverse the river, given how few crossings we have. So I do think that warrants some discussion and maybe some input from staff around what other options we could consider other than just standing by the decision we made 2 years ago. So through the chair, you are correct in that the project was brought forward in 2024 to replace the current pedestrian bridge. It was not approved. However, the condition has continued to deteriorate. It did pass its inspection in October. We are inspecting it by a structural engineer every 6 months, so its next inspection is due for April. However, it is still deteriorating, and at some point it will have to be removed. Can we fence it at the time being? Yes, we can, but people will climb on it, items will start to fall off of it. It does need to be managed appropriately. In 2024, the cost estimate to replace the bridge with a similar structure, it would be slightly different. We weren't proposing a wooden deck, it'd be a concrete and steel deck, so that way it'd be more accessible. But that cost in 2024 was $1 million.
I really want to support this line of conversation here. I think it's a different context in which we're making decisions now around where we can invest for this community, and in particular to support the future of active transportation. And so I would be all in support of just slowing down on this and figuring out a new plan moving forward, and also seeing whether or not there's other opportunities for us to find the funding to do it really well, as opposed to, the option that's in front of us, and we can find people for climbing over.
Thank you. How does this bridge fit into the Riverwalk plan? Because I know there's proposed bridges on that plan. So do we have a formula saying so many bridges at so many points, or do we just, how is that done? And how does this fit in? And I guess I'm looking to both Julia and Jeanette.
So this crossing is included in that Riverwalk and waterfront plan. This pedestrian crossing was always envisioned to remain.
And I know I'm asking a question that I've already asked you, but I think it is important for the public conversation to have this context as well. I know I've been bugging you for 2 years about how could we potentially retrofit the bridge that was put in 10 years ago to accommodate motor vehicles, and is there a way to change the use of that bridge to accommodate both vehicles and pedestrians? And I think it's important for you to share the answer to that publicly as well.
Yeah, fully recognize that the previous bridge was a single-lane Bailey Bridge that was on loan to the municipality from the MTO following the 1980 flood, and it was given to the municipality in 1985. Recognize it was a single lane and was a single lane for many years until the bridge was replaced. However, now that we've replaced the bridge and it's been replaced in accordance with today's Highway Bridge Design Code, we cannot allow pedestrians to walk on that bridge without a proper sidewalk. So under today's Highway Bridge Design Code, a separate pedestrian area is required. So it's not appropriate to narrow that bridge down to allow for pedestrians and vehicles, as it's been designed and built as a vehicle bridge.
And just as a follow-up, because my understanding is that the materials used for this particular bridge do not allow for the installation of a concrete sidewalk on the existing bridge surface.
That's correct. It's a truss bridge.
All right, so a lesson for all of us around building in flexibility when making these decisions.
Just one other thought I had randomly as we were talking about the future of the bridge is we do have that potential new large development that's going to be happening in town, and the intention there is to create a lot of connections and pathways and to really increase active transportation. So it might be another opening to have a conversation about the future of that bridge and that plan.
Just to add to that, any new water crossing is considered a Schedule C environmental assessment. It's a very extensive public consultation process because it is considered a new water crossing. So not that it can't be done, it's just it's more expensive and more time consuming to look at other crossings.
I guess I'm seeking clarification. So there's a potential motion to remove the 100,000 from the capital budget, which will, is that the original
I didn't come prepared to put forward
Not a
a
motion,
motion
just
this
to have an
afternoon. but,
understanding, just a comment.
I think what I'm expressing right now, and I'm just interested in having more of a conversation about it, is I'm not comfortable with approving a budget to remove it without also having a conversation about what are we going to do instead. My concern is, obviously it will need to be closed when it needs to be closed, but if we are not proactively now starting to have a conversation about how are pedestrians going to safely cross once that bridge is closed, I think we all know where pedestrians are going to cross, and our director has just told us how unsafe that would be, and it's contrary to the highway safe code, whatever that federal code. And so, if we close that bridge without a strategy for how we're going to accommodate pedestrian traffic, we will have pedestrians crossing a bridge that is designed solely for vehicles in our downtown, and that's a problem, right?
So just to follow up, yeah, I think we fully appreciate that we do need that next step, next phase, and that's probably can come through the active transportation considerations, through the TMP. I am just concerned from a risk perspective, sticking a fence on it versus removing it. Like right now, I think the last assessment back in October said the bridge was still structurally okay. We could get to May and it's not. And then we do have some risk exposure removing it versus just having a fence on it so people can get around and go on. That would be my only caution for council to, if they were consideration of pulling out 100,000 from the budget, the bridge will have to be removed regardless, whether it happens this year or next year. Just want to bring that to your attention.
Oh, no, I think I was going to say the same thing as what Mike was saying, which is whether we take $100,000 out or don't take $100,000 out, it sounds like that bridge is coming out of commission, whether we put a fence on it, whether we take it out. So it's either going to go out of commission for $0 or go out of commission for $100,000. We'll still, as a separate discussion, still need to have that one. So I don't know if they're necessarily tethered.
My question's for Director Davidson. If we take the bridge out with no plan to reinstall, does that restart any river impact assessment? Like if you were looking at a new water crossing, or because the footprint's there, will we always be able to put a bridge back there?
So it would still be considered a replacement structure, as that $100,000 to remove the bridge is just to remove the superstructure. It does not remove the abutments that are there. The abutments are still in good condition.
If we were to determine that we wanted to replace the bridge, and I appreciate the clarification that it's not like for like, because I did have concerns about the accessibility of the existing bridge, would there be any efficiencies in terms of the cost of removal of the existing structure if those same large cranes or whatever were also installing the new one? Like, I'm wondering if this is something we are potentially considering, whether we should hold off on removal until we could put the two as one project.
So through the chair, if there is consideration of replacing the bridge, I would wait to replace it all, remove it and replace it at the same time, because then you're saving the mobilization, demobilization of the contractor. You'd be paying that twice.
So a clarification on what you were saying about the abutment. So if we use the existing abutments and we do not have to do another study, is that what you're saying? And so then if there are other points across the river where there are former abutments, would the same thing apply?
So there is no existing water crossing in other locations of the river. I understand there is the old railway crossing, but because that is so old, no, we cannot. We actually can't even use those abutments.
Okay, so stuff like that doesn't apply. It's only this. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so there's no other questions here from council right now. Our youth councilor had a question about that.
Less so a question, more of a comment. That walking bridge is the main bridge that youth who are walking to school, that's their quickest route, that's where they go. So either way, that bridge is going to be inaccessible, whether it's taken down or just closed off for the time being. So promoting a safer route on a different bridge somewhere nearby would be an important resource to avoid youth trying to cross the busy road.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think that's a very valid point. Marilena?
And I mean, just a final thought on this conversation is, it just strikes me that we've got to get this right, given the central and importance. And so it's just a point that I want to make is really, really being careful about the decision we make around this and ensuring that we consider all the possible options in front of us, including those that are financial, to help us do the ideal scenario.
Yeah, and it sounds like it doesn't have to imminently be closed down, because we have another 6 months before the next test on it. Is that, am I getting that right, Director?
That is correct. The next inspection is scheduled for April.
I think, CAO, in your comments, you mentioned traffic master plan, transportation master plan. Is that's not included in this year's budget, though? That's not something that is imminent?
Through the chair, I can speak to that. It's technically not included. However, from internal conversations with senior leadership, we do see it as still a priority project that needs to be resourced before the completion of the official plan, which is proposed in this year's budget, probably about a 2-year project. So, what would be most important in terms of growth readiness is to have that TMP or Transportation Master Plan completed in advance of the completion of the official plan. What that Transportation Master Plan would consider is not just vehicle mobility networks throughout the municipality, including out towards the potential new nuclear area, where we recognize we need more east-west connections to that project site, particularly with respect to addressing existing public comments and the cultural heritage landscape of Lakeshore Road. But it would also be looking at active transportation networks and complete streets recommendations that would provide policy recommendations as well as technical schedule information for the official plan. So that's something that we will be working on as a way to mobilize that TMP project imminently, because we do feel it has significant influence on the growth readiness aspects of where we are sitting right now with the new nuclear project, but it's also timely for the community as well, especially with these types of conversations. I would envision that the TMP would be looking at precisely what Council's discussing right now, is where those connections are needed to create a connected mobility network throughout the municipality from an active transportation standpoint, and make those recommendations from a capital project perspective to be incorporated into the asset management or capital project planning.
Okay, that's awesome. But it's a ways off still. So I'm wondering, in where we are right now, sort of with this decision, is there any merit to considering a smaller, more localized study that looks at how we are using the Barrett Street crossing, both in terms of vehicles and those using active transportation, to sort of maybe help inform this council's decision? Because understanding how many pedestrians are using that every day, as our youth councillor points out, young people especially, might be important for us in terms of determining whether it's worth that investment in the near term or not. And hey, if there's more pedestrians using it than vehicles, then we may have a whole different conversation about how we use the existing bridge.
Are we still, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Just to speak to Councillor Holloway-Wadani's question, and I would defer to some expertise as well from Director Davidson, but what I would anticipate is, if we were looking at a site-specific review, it would be looking at an analysis of, the do not replace, what impacts would that be? Where is the next closest route that is actually travelable from a active transportation capacity? And then it would be looking at option to replace and what potential designs that would look like. Without a complete streets policy, it would probably be looking at best practices in terms of sourcing from other communities where there is a more robust complete streets policy in place, or alternative locations. But as Director Davidson mentioned, that alternative location may be challenging because then you're looking at environmental assessments. So it would definitely be possible, but it would probably just be looking at an options framework and then the costs and then recommendations towards ultimate design. But I would leave any further comment to Director Davidson.
Are we still on this topic, or can we switch? Okay. Well, since we're talking transportation and Doug Ford's burying everything, the 401 and underground wiring, maybe we should run a subway to Wesleyville?
I guess this question would be for you, Director Davidson. What would it be feasible in advance of Thursday's meeting to have a ballpark estimate on what a localized options study might look like so that we could have that information for a potential amendment?
We can certainly try. However, that is a very tight timeline for cost estimates because they would be done by a consultant.
I wonder, just in the spirit of what you're asking, is whether or not we could just earmark this money towards that kind of work and, seeing where we would eventually land. Also understanding that we've got two other things that potentially could impact some of our thinking other than the longer term plan that you were referring to, but there's the file factory and there is the new development that is in front of us. And so I don't think any of that's going to get figured out by Thursday, but I think that taking a bit of a breath and making sure that it's done as properly as we can with the information that we might get beyond Thursday might be a way forward. And so it would just be not necessarily taking that money out of the budget, but earmarking it towards that kind of effort. And hopefully it wouldn't take that amount of money, but we would give ourselves the time and the sort of the security for that.
Any other discussions currently on the bridge on Barrett Street? Nope, seeing none, so Councillor Les.
Yeah, two things. The one thing on the carry forwards from 2025 or 24 is that's all fully funded out of levy already, right? The 19.5 million?
There would be multiple sources, but yes, that's already approved and funded.
Okay, thank you. So now the next big topic will be the fire station. And I'd like to know the status of where we are and where we're going. And is the site the right site, et cetera, et cetera?
Thank you. And through the chair, as you know, this is year 4 of me bringing this to this table. So I think you know a lot about the background and the requirements for its replacement. We've invested over $650,000 thus far in multiple studies and design to bring us to where we're at. We have made application for SDF grant to assist in the funding of the station, which I've advised we're still waiting word back on. There's a number of factors that have changed since I initially brought this to the table, that being OPG. And we know that the requirements for fire and emergency services are going to be directly affected by OPG coming to Port Hope. That's why we're initiating a phased approach. Phase 1 being the entrance off of Pemberton has to happen no matter what we build. And in relation to your question about is it the right location? From the information that I have from OPG, it's not so much location, but it's response times. So we have to be able to respond with a first truck within 8.38 minutes. Right now, if you use Google Maps, and that's what I've been relying on, it's 7 minutes from Fox Road to the OPG site. So it meets the minimum requirements. Again, I haven't been provided anything in writing stipulating requirements from OPG related to emergency response, because it's going to be bringing additional specialized equipment, specialized trucks, and realistically, at some point, I'll be sitting in front of next council, probably asking for a full-time fire service, because it's going to require those type of response times that we're going to have firefighters in the stations to provide that response time. That's not today. That'll be years to come. But that location that we've already made that investment in is the right location now and for the future. The reason I'm not bringing the station forward now is because we don't know the actual specifics of the station requirements, but the location is correct.
And the site is big enough.
It is. Yes, sir.
And just in terms of this conversation, appreciate your patience with all of it. This is a key priority for continuing to advocate for at some key negotiations that we're trying to put in place in Q1 of this year around exactly our priorities for the community in relation to having additional supports for infrastructure coming from the province and making the business case of it makes no sense to pay for a station that's going to be redundant as soon as it gets built, but rather doing something in a phased-in process that gets us to where we need to be to meet the regulatory requirements that will be in front of us. But we also have to show some goodwill around continuing to do work and investing our own dollars into the project. And so it's a balancing act, but certainly I think it's top of mind in terms of a priority, a pressing priority for this community. And it's certainly come up probably no less than 100 times in conversations with the province and with OPG, really using the business case of it makes no sense for us to be using provincial dollars for something that's just going to be redundant for the community.
Thank you, and thank you, Chief, for that information. Are there any more discussions on the fire station? No, seeing none. Okay, let's move on to the next topic. Councillor Less.
Yeah, I see one of the requests is for a backup generator to be installed at Town Park. Is there any way that it can be somewhat movable for in the future? Because that may not always be the long-term evacuation site.
So thank you through the chair. I'll probably tag team with Director Williams on this aspect. High level, we have done some analysis of the best approach, and we've recommended the permanent generator at that site, specifically to accommodate the volume of people to that site during an emergency evacuation. We have reviewed portable generators to be deployed to the site through emergency exercises as well as from an operational standpoint moving forward. And there are some significant concerns with temporary generators related to the volume and being able to source those and come to the community in a very short period of time, excuse me, which is essential during an emergency evacuation activity. The other aspect is it's not just a plug and play with a temporary or a portable generator. So if we had the opportunity to have a generator to the site during an emergency, being able to be delivered within a good period of time, we do need to have licensed electricians on site to hook the generator up, which during an emergency, may cause significant concerns. From an operational standpoint related to the cost, a gas generator is the most efficient opportunity that we've come forward for a permanent asset at the site.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the generator? No, seeing none. Moving on, next topic, Councillor Mink.
Thank you. I have a question about the parks and playground plan. So my question is, how is this different than the leisure master plan. Does it include as well potential cleanup sites? Is it inclusive of the waterfront plan, the pier? What's involved with this plan, and how is it different than what we already have?
Thank you for the question. Sorry, apparently I can't talk today. Our intent with the park and playground plan is to use the information from the Leisure Services Master Plan, which was completed in 2021, to do a midpoint review of the 10-year Leisure Services Master Plan and really focus on open spaces and what amenities or what future planning, again, talking about growth readiness in other areas that aren't necessarily optimized or used. We've high level talked about repurposing of some sports fields, and that isn't formalized in a plan anywhere. So that would be another opportunity within the parks plan. Really using the information that's been updated from a census, growth population perspective. When we did the Leisure Services Master Plan, we were in the middle of a pandemic, and we knew at the time that our population was going to be changing in the near future, and we've been experiencing that. So some demographic review, but also opportunity for open spaces, aligning with the Waterfront Riverwalk Master Plan on a 5-year basis. What should we be focusing on the next 5 years to close out the Leisure Service Master Plan? So it's essentially a mid-plan review with a focus on parks, open spaces, and waterfront. The other aspect is there is some work to be done related to the parkland dedication policy with legislative updates, and we would be able to tie that work into the planning process as well.
Thank you. That was very inclusive. So just a follow-up question, as you may recall, we've had conversations and we took a drive out to Osaka a few years back where we identified that there wasn't any owned parkland by the municipality. So we did get it put into a potential draft plan of subdivision, but considering that's still a draft plan, would this plan include considering future parks for development hamlets and areas that don't have anything at this time?
Yeah, it's a great question. My vision is to address some of that through an updated policy. Our policy is quite dated. There's a lot of conversation about environmentally protected lands and how the municipality may assume them or not. So that's an aspect as well. And collaborating with development services, there's an opportunity, I think, to look at lands that may be developed in the future or are zoned related to that, to really think through some of the targets for large parcels that may be developed. Osaka, as an example, we've had the conversation, it's very piecemeal, right? The different development applications are coming through and looking at that area as a whole. So that ties into one of the aspects that I envision this process undertaking.
Okay, is that with this? Yeah, go ahead.
Tag on to Vicky's thoughts. I'm glad to see that Rapley Park is getting some attention. Is the trail walkable from Lakeshore to the park?
So thank you for the question. So the area that you're referring to is the Little Creek area that was conveyed to the municipality through the settlement from the Mason Homes aspect. It is not a formalized trail. There are components that are included in our operating budget to develop a substantial formal plan for that area. Because it's in the area of a water course, there are hazards, setbacks that need to be developed if we are going to formalize the trail, which is part of our plan to connect Rapley Park, where the development of the basketball court and multipurpose court will be, with a connection to the Lakeshore area. So technically, no, but technically it is municipal property that we will be working to formalize that trail connection.
Wonderful. Moving on to the next topic. Does anybody have a next topic that they would like to bring up right now? Claire, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a question, I think, to all of the directors. I'm interested having a little bit more information about the one-time items, not like the 5,000 here or there, but there are in a number of the budgets sort of significant 100,000, 200,000 one-time items, which I assume are these kinds of special projects. And I'm curious to understand what those are, because I imagine they'll be on our agendas at some point throughout the year as well.
So does CAO want to speak to that?
Yeah, I guess I'll start weighing in. I think we have we can talk to a few of them. So obviously, some of the major ones, the one times, because we're using different funding sources strategically for those. And I look at Director McAdams too, because most of those are development services related. OP review, floodplain mapping, subwatershed studies. Those are the big ticket items. I know under the CIO's office, the one time is the customer service technology to move towards a centralized customer service department. But those are the bigger, I would say, the big key ticket items. And I'm just looking around at my staff here. I think I captured most of the key ones from a large. Marina Master Plan. Is that what you said? Yeah, Marina Master Plan. So we can give you the comprehensive list of those sort of one time. They are buried in there in the different budget sheets, but we can try and summarize those and share those for you before Thursday.
Thank you. Councillor Les?
We haven't talked about grants and the 45,000 that is left over. That usually takes about 17 hours to resolve. Well, I know we're not doing it, but we haven't had the special meeting that we were supposed to have, or a meeting of those people that wanted to present. Will that ever occur?
Director Baxter?
So we had provided the update to that program, right? So council has given direction that we no longer have a community grants and donations program. So that formally removed the need to have any sort of meeting. There's been no applications at this point in time for that funding. They will be aligned to community initiatives, right? So for example, we may identify that we want to have a new community festival, and we would, staff would put out the request, right, for proposals from within the community. Those would be evaluated internally, and then some would be awarded, similar to a procurement process, on a more competitive, basis, as opposed to having organizations, approach us with what they would like to do, so that it's more closely tied to our strategic plan. So that's the direction we received earlier in the year from council. Hence, there won't be a separate meeting. We had the slide before, right, that showed we are going to do some service agreements with the previous foundational funding organizations, and then we would have these strategic initiatives, which was the 45,000 that you were speaking to. It's up on the slide there as well, if you'd like. Okay.
Councillor Mink.
So, thank you. Just to follow up on that. So those that are receiving the foundational funding, first question is, have they been, we're still doing that, I'm assuming, right? The foundational funding? I thought I saw that there.
Yeah. There is a provision for those three organizations.
And they have not been informed yet, or is it just we're holding for that and you're waiting for budget? Is that?
Well, yeah, to start, we'd need to know, the change overall, that was made public months ago. In terms of like an allocation for the three of them, we can't even start that until we know how much money we have to work with. But I don't believe, if anything, there would be preliminary conversations about what that service agreement might look like, but I'm not directly involved in that.
Sorry, just to, no, I don't mean to interrupt. I have heard, and I know one of these organizations is waiting, like they don't know how to move forward into next year without knowing if they're getting this funding or not. So, so that's my understanding, is that will be just for us, I guess, to discuss and divide up. And then the 45,000 is us, the municipality, coming forward and saying, we would like this to happen, come forward, and we may grant you that funding. Is that how that is working?
That's correct.
Okay. Last question is, we have had in the past different organizations come up to us, such as the Food Bank. I remember there was a Farley Mowat thing a few years back or whatever, where they actually just came and asked for some funding. Do we have any funds set aside for those small donations amount, or are we completely not entertaining those if they come forward with those requests?
So at this point, the direction we've had is to not have a community grants or a donations process.
Okay, wonderful. Next topic. Anybody have a next topic that they'd like to discuss? Les? Yeah.
Staying on the letter G, grass mowers. And do we get a trade-in value on the old mowers if we go to the new mowers? Or how will they be auctioned off? Or?
So
Sorry, I'm
that's
looking-
okay. I'll take this one while you're looking over there. So this is a parks efficiency project being brought forward. Trade-in is an opportunity. So essentially, we currently have 3 grass mowers that are diesel mowers, and we're experiencing significant maintenance issues with them from diesel related to regeneration requirements. And with the essentially they run every day, all day during the week. So we will be trading in those 3 to get 4 gas mowers. And essentially with 4 mowers, we're able to split our grass crew into 2 with the other truck and trailer aspects that we have. So we're really looking forward to a more efficient deployment of 2 grass crews with this addition. Yes.
Thank you. Anything else from council right now? Let's see. Sorry. Oh, Les.
Last
Yeah,
one.
yeah, go ahead,
All
Les.
right, I
Yep, of
promise.
course. No,
Okay.
please.
GPS, the cameras in the snow plows. First of all, do we use the snow plows in the summer too, for anything?
Through the chair, the trucks are used in the summertime.
Yep, okay. But, so my point is that I think the cameras are great and they record what you need to record, but I don't really see the need to do the monthly software hookup.
So the monthly fee is for data storage as well as the modem fee, because they not only record the video, but it's the video, it's the data storage that has the monthly operating cost. No, it's tied into the larger system of the, that is currently on the GPS part of the trucks.
Okay, moving on. Next questions. Les, you have any more? No? Any other questions? Okay, so at this point, we're going to move on to a different type of scenario. So we're going to put forth, so we're going to discuss motions that are potential for changing the budget over the next course. So if you have any motions that you are considering right now, not necessarily putting it out there right now, but just whatever you're considering, let's have a discussion on those. So does anybody have anything on the budget that they would like to, Councillor Mink?
Thank you. So I don't think it would be much of a surprise to anybody, but I would like to us to consider committing to the WECI funding for the dam up in Garden Hill. When the province removed their responsibility of dams, they put that shared responsibility on the conservation authorities and the municipalities. And if we do not move forward with this, the impacts could be detrimental. Earlier today, I did request that staff follow up with GRCA to understand exactly which of the 2 options is preferred and what the actual dollar amount may look like. I think there may be a little bit of information lost in translation since that time. I did have a quick little email over lunch as well, so I think it will be of value for to get that updated information. And so I don't really propose an amount right now because I think we need to get that proper amount.
Wonderful. So we'll open this up for a little bit of discussion on that. Yeah, Mayor Elena.
So I agree, that's a really important topic. I wonder if it falls under the same category as the other items for consideration that we had talked about earlier today, which is we don't know yet all the information. We don't yet know what are the potential funding resources that might be available to us, and we don't know what the overall costs are. So I'm wondering if it falls under that same category of priority items for consideration, but that we need to await further information before we allocate any specific dollar figure to it.
I agree. It's just that the funding application has to go in either January or February. And that would be our commitment. If we then back out, then that funding is null and void, and it wouldn't come forward for another 2 years.
So I guess my follow-up question on that is, so does that become something that we decide as a council that we need to be moving forward on in terms of an application and not necessarily making a decision here at the budget table around it? Because it seems like the first step would be deciding on an application and exactly what some of the potential funding sources might be to cover those costs. You earlier talked about the various different funding opportunities that might be available.
So I agree, and I think that's why the direction for staff to call, maybe contact the GRCA tomorrow, just to find out exactly what's required. If it does require a financial commitment from us, I think we need to firm that up and then come back with that information.
But again, I'm not disagreeing that there's a time on this and there are deadlines, but how would this be different than the items of consideration that came forward earlier, say around the status of the bridge and Walton Street repairs and the fact that it's evolving in terms of knowing exactly what we need to be investing into this. And we were sure that some of those items for consideration would not be on the levy, but there would be enough of a cushion in our reserves to deal with it.
CAO.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with Mayor Hinkiski. There is the opportunity. Like, I'd rather have the right decision to make an informed decision for council to have an informed decision. We will try our best for tomorrow to see what we can pull. If there is no requirement in that application for Port Hope support, GRCA can move forward with their application. Obviously, it would be a good move to do. I suspect there is going to be some request for some support for us. We do have our contingency reserves, as the mayor suggested, that we could tap into. I don't want to hold up the whole budget necessarily for this one item. I like the idea of parking it for future consideration, although future consideration may only be a week or two from now.
The funding application through Wiki, the Conservation Authority cannot submit the application unless they have a funding commitment from the participating municipality. That's my understanding.
Okay, appreciate that. And then if GRCA has pivoted on their approach from full decommissioning or full restoration now to a modified version of a smaller scale back, that's where we'll try and get that information. If we can get that information, we'll bring it back to council on Thursday. If not, then we might have to bump it to future consideration a little bit, and whether that's a week or two out. But we'll do our best.
Do you know whether this is the same as the way in which we did the fire station application, where they said they needed our commitment for funding, but we didn't necessarily have to have the money committed, just the intention that, yes, if it goes through, we will? Do you know whether it's of the same situation?
I don't feel fully comfortable answering that question, but I do know that this has been, as I said at the beginning, the whole idea behind this application of WECI was set up by the province so that the municipalities and the conservation authorities could work together. So that's the whole reason behind this funding. So it's a little different in that way, where it does require that commitment at the time of application.
Are you happy with the answers right now? Yeah? Okay. Any other motions that are potentially being considered? Councillor Todd?
Yeah, I'd like to recommend that the mayor remove the Barrett Street pedestrian bridge from the 2026 capital.
Councillor Clare.
I'd actually think, I don't know if it would need a motion, but I think I would be more interested in seeing us reallocate those, or just allocate them generally to the Barrett Street Bridge issue so that we could use them for a localized study and use it more flexibly. So you would say remove and then add?
Yeah, second motion.
Versus just, versus reframe? Either way, I guess it accomplishes. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, I'm hearing it's just two steps of a similar kind of in final goal, right? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so is there any, oh, sorry, continue on, Councillor.
I know it's just to change, amend the wording to just reallocate or build in flexibility. I'm looking at the CAO or clerk can help us with that. I just don't want to I just don't want to pass a motion removing it and then try to bring forward a motion adding funds back in for what I'm talking about, only to have that not pass.
So just for clarity, we're kind of like discussing what we want to do with that, not necessarily actually putting forth the motion right this second, so. Yeah. Yeah, so right now we're just discussing all the things that we might potentially be putting into motions, not actually wordsmithing the motion itself right this second. So, CAO.
So just for clarification, the remove and add option will require some more thought, because if you're going to add, you're adding back 100,000, you're going to add them back in 30 or 40. I would probably just prefer to leave the project. We can just change the description within the capital project sheet, leave it at the 100,000, because it may come down to that we have to rip the thing down or something that comes out of the study. The money is there. If we don't use it, it carries forward, but we have enough to cover off. The study is not going to be $100,000, because I would not recommend doing it if it came in at $100,000. So I think just to, we'll just reframe the project description sheet and leave it as is, would be my recommendation.
Wonderful. Any other discussions on the Barrett Street Bridge right now? Mayor
Lena. So just for clarification, do I see council endorsement for just the rewording of that line item in the budget to reflect what the CAO has just articulated? Okay. Okay.
So yes, that is what it is.
Okay, so I'm hearing an endorsement. I'm hearing an endorsement. Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else that anybody would be flagging as a potential motion for Thursday? I'm not sure who went first, so Councillor Less.
First, I need clarification on slide 34, which is the infrastructure funding. Yeah, do you have the requisite amount of money in your, allocated to this? Are you satisfied for 2026 with the amount of money provided?
So the amount of money provided is in alignment with the plan that we had talked about. So we are achieving that. So we could definitely use more money, but we also have capacity challenges. But the good part is we've established a plan. In the first year, we're actually following the plan. That's very important. So yes, we're achieving that at this point.
Well, 1 out of 14 isn't bad.
I appreciate the interest in that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Councillor Mink.
Thank you. So lots of discussion about transportation plan and pedestrians walking over a bridge, but we do have the discussion of our vulnerable rural community who may lose all access to everything. So I would like to consider the rural to urban transit, what that would look like as a special service. And I know there has been discussion about offering an alternative transportation service, but that hasn't come forward yet. So I don't want to leave people with no options. So I just want to entertain what that would look like.
Okay. Do any staff want to speak to that at all? Looking at maybe Director Baxter.
sorry, was there a question? I know this, I heard the state, like, to me, it was a statement. So
No,
was there
no,
a-
unless,
we looked at direction of
unless
council.
staff can add anything else to what the plan may be, if there's an alternative plan, but until we have that alternative plan, I think that we need to consider this. And earlier today, I did ask, and Director Baxter did say that he would create a slide to show what that would look like as a special service. So I'm just saying that we need to, we haven't had much of a discussion as a council, lots of discussion about the pedestrian bridge, but not really about those people out in the rural area that are stuck potentially in a very, very detrimental situation without it. So I think that's something that we definitely need to consider.
Good. Yeah, sorry. Yes, please, go ahead.
This is kind of a point of order question. I'm starting to lose the thread around process right now. I had reviewed the information that was shared with us by the clerk's office around how we were to do this, and we don't seem to be following that in terms of the process for amending staff's budget. And so I wondered if the clerk, if you could just provide some clarity around how we're supposed to do that and the new process.
Thank you very much, Councillor Holloway Wadwani, for that question. So I do want to note that ultimately, as this is a special council meeting, it is council's prerogative. If they wish to bring forward a motion, they absolutely have the right to do so at tonight's meeting. The process that was recommended by the clerk was for the today to have the intention of there to be deliberation and discussion around the staff proposed budget with formal motions to recommend to the mayor to make any sort of amendments to that budget to come forward on Thursday. I look to the chair and I don't want to speak on behalf of the chair, but my understanding from the chair's intention of the discussion that is taking place right now is for council to bandy ideas about any motions that they are anticipating bringing forward for potential consideration on the Thursday meeting, with the intention truly being that it gives staff an idea of the kind of things that council may be intending to bring forward. So if there's any preparation that staff need to do on their end, they're able to do so. And similarly for the mayor as well, for her to have an idea of the kind of recommendations that council. And I mean, the ultimate disposition will be dependent on a formal motion that is brought forward with a mover and a seconder and is voted by council.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I don't know if you have to rule on the point of order, but it looks like we're doing things fine. Mary Hankowski.
So I do have a process-related question to that, and that is that given that the intention was to work in a collaborative way around this budget, the conversation we had earlier, which is that we were seem to be landing on a consensus around just changing some of the wording around the line item for the bridge. Do we necessarily have to go through a motion around that, or can we actually make a decision here in collaboration that this is what we would like to happen?
So my only response to that, Madam Mayor, was that I'm not overly familiar with what's on that particular project description sheet. I mean, if it is something that is within staff's purview to change that item, I would anticipate that shouldn't be an issue. But if there is something very specific that this council, as from a consensus perspective, wants to change with respect to that line item, I would recommend it could be something as simple as council endorsing the mayor's intention to direct staff to change the project description sheet. Could be something like that if that would be something they'd want to do, but it would really be dependent on your consideration. Yep.
Yep, that seems very straightforward, and I don't think we need to make it overly complicated. But if it's a matter of record to have that, that's great, but, I don't think it's an overly complicated motion that has to be put forward for that.
Yes, Councillor Mink.
Just more clarity. So we did ask for the org chart as well. So would this also be the time if we want any additional information, not necessarily a motion, but we're asking staff for additional information to make that known now?
Yep, absolutely, and yes, this is the ideal time for any additional information that is needed. How are we looking, everyone? I'm not seeing any other, sorry, Councillor Thoms.
Just sitting here thinking about the community grants and stuff that we're no longer doing. I had been working on a motion to bring forward. So it ultimately does have a budget impact, so I'm float the idea now. I would like to look at that after hearing the delegation from the food bank and the dire need in our community around the food bank. And I would like to look at possibly donating up to $20,000 from our parking ticket revenue to the food bank in a pilot program. I think the Tickets for Toys was a very successful thing. So that's my, I'm commenting at this quick, so I don't have everything written down in front of me. And it would also maybe incentivize more parking ticket revenue, and this was something that maybe if we get on board with doing that, the other municipalities in the county would maybe also look at taking on the same program to give a meaningful donation to the food bank on a yearly basis.
Thank you. So I'm going to open that up if any council has any discussion on that. Councillor Clare.
I think it's a lovely idea. Would you be thinking that it would be modeled after the Toys for Tickets program, where it would be like people making a donation to the food bank in the amount of the fine in lieu of paying the fine?
No, I think it would be more of just a percentage of our ticket revenue. I think taking the option maybe away, and people maybe know that their ticket money is, percentage of their ticket fine is going to the food bank, I think is a good plan.
I think it's a really important priority. I wonder if, given though what we were talking about earlier, could we not set some kind of goal that's linked to our strat plan around ensuring food security in our community, and then therefore it would flow logically that they could come forward and we could allocate a substantial part of that $45,000 directly to the food bank without necessarily impacting on our ticket revenues?
Councillor Thompson, do you want to say anything to that, or you're good? Councillor Less.
Well, it would be, to Darrell's suggestion, it'd be very timely because they've lost that amount of funding just recently, so it would be a nice top-up.
Does the director want to speak to anything on that? Or the CAO?
Sorry, I'll just jump in quickly. Yeah, I think I see the desire of councillors to support the food bank. We've heard it in previous council meetings and from Councillor Darrell. Just the revenue stream, we do have, uses of the revenue stream already. So we'd have to go back and look at that, what we're going to do if in absence of that $20,000 of parking revenue. To the mayor's point, we do have this little bit of, $45,000 catch basin that we could potentially tap into. So the concept of Toys for Tickets for Toys for Tickets or Tickets for Toys, I understand that. I totally appreciate that. That's the same line, the same vein I think that you're going for, Councillor. We'd have to go back and look at the impact of pulling out $20,000 out of our revenue stream. It just means it's a bit of a shell game where the actual dollars are going to come from, whether it's parking revenues, the $45,000 that we have as an open fund right now. So I would be leaning towards, if council's direction is to support the food bank, and that's what I think I'm hearing, I'd love to see that motion, if you can, directing it more from the 45,000 with this direct linkage to the strategic plan. I think that would work. But we can do it from the revenue, but we'd have to go back and rethink the foregone revenue that we had in parking, how we originally were using it.
Thank you. I think it's a great idea, and I think as the CAO said, there is a desire for the council to support the food bank in that way. But I feel a little bit like we're just coming up with a solution, like as we sit here. And I think there may be opportunities where we could have campaigns, like the parking campaign. We may do it, particular seasons or things like that, and come up with sort of a better plan that would work better for us. So my preference, I'm not abandoning the idea, I just think that we need to approach it in a more planned way or strategic way.
Yeah, I think just to plays devil's advocate a little bit, I think obviously the most straightforward thing is to just give a grant to the food bank through that 45,000. But I think there's potential ripple effects that are really different from a community perspective by using the in lieu of you're paying your fine, you make a donation to a particular organization, because those individual residents become donors to that organization who then form a relationship with the organization, who are going to get follow-up materials, get more educated about food insecurity across Northumberland, and that there's more community benefit overall to that other approach, although I think logistically it's a bit trickier for the municipality. And I think it sort of plays more of an educative role as well. And I do like the idea, I know bylaw gets a bad rap sometimes, just because, people don't like getting fined or tickets. And this kind of program where you have that option may take the sting off of it a little bit and maybe makes it easier for us to hit those increased targets around enforcement while, without getting the pushback from community.
I also don't think it has to be a zero-sum game. I like the idea of, if we know the shortfall is immediate, we have it within ourselves to immediately try to help the situation, whilst, as Councillor Mink was saying, figure out a longer-term plan of how we can move forward. And don't forget, we're still trying to find a place for the food bank to be in the community, so it could be part of a real commitment to food security in this community, from the fundraising, granting space. And so we can start with the low-hanging fruit that's easy and then think about the plan without necessarily having to figure out that line item from the budget immediately, but think about future steps around it.
I guess my question to Councillor Darrell is the number 20,000, has that been an ask or something you've heard through the food bank, or is that an arbitrary number? Like, do we know what that level of need is? And to the mayor's point, is there other ways that we can support through, space allocation or location or things like that? I guess it is a direct impact on the levy. If we pull 20,000 out of parking revenue, we have to find it elsewhere.
The number 20,000, I think, just comes from, they're never going to have the need filled completely, right? There's always going to be a shortfall when it comes to the food bank, I think. And we on years past, I'd give 10,000, and we all know $10,000 doesn't go as far as it used to go. So that's kind of where the number 20 come from.
In terms of space allocation, they are losing their space by the fall. And the space they're paying for is about $2,000 a month. So that's, if we could give that in kind in one of our buildings, that would be wonderful.
So I'm going to keep hammering on this to say, I think we can agree. I think everybody agrees that this is a really important priority for the community, but it's about, how can we move forward from this point on, knowing that space is an issue, that there could be some real innovations around ticketing and what that might mean. But if the immediate need is, we can certainly think about pivoting for that right now without necessarily having to revisit the $20,000 on the budget line item like in the next couple days.
Councillor Clare.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I wonder if this is something, if it's an intriguing enough idea, but not something for consideration at today's budget table. I assume we'll get a report at some point, or maybe we could request that we get a report on the pilot of the Toys for Tickets program so that we can have a better understanding of how many people opted in and what the implications would be on the revenue stream, and that, because maybe it's something we can consider moving forward based on that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea, and I see the CAO typing quickly there, so taking note.
I was trying to quickly find out if what kind of revenue was generated from that. I'm going to say it was probably less than $2,000 off the top of my head. Like, it wasn't like earth-shattering $20,000. It was probably in the 2,000. But mind you, that was only a very truncated period of collection. So, yeah.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Les.
Just a general comment that you've left us in a bit of a dilemma with this budget because it's too good to be true compared to other budgets. And the value of what we're getting for $176 a year extra is going to be a little hard to explain with the amount of stuff we're getting. So we're going to have to be able to provide full details pretty quickly.
Through the chair, yes, we are working on a comprehensive communication strategy as we come out of the budget. Kate and her team will be working on that and have been working on that. It is a very unique budget, I will have to say, and in my years in municipal government, it is a very unique budget because of the moving parts, because of the complexity, because of the reserves, because of contributions from different levels of government. So yeah, we are working on that. So we will try and manage and give talking points for council and have it very clear on our budget webpage how we arrived at this stellar budget.
Mayor Elena.
I also think it's really exciting for all those reasons too, because it's an opportunity to address a lot of the issues that we have in the municipality, including addressing the infrastructure deficit and the gap, without loading that onto our constituents. And Chair, when you asked if there are going to be other motions being brought forward, I will definitely be putting a motion forward to further reduce the percentage of the tax levy drawing on some of the hard-earned additional reserves for community betterment that have been achieved for this municipality over the last year. And my ultimate goal will be to bring us down to 2.7%.
Doesn't that sound fantastic? Any questions or comments currently? No?
Chair?
Oh, sorry.
If I may just do a follow-up, we can, I looked to Councillor Mink, we can pull the community care transportation slide back up if that's helpful. I haven't adjusted the slide itself, so it's 27. Yeah. But just from modeling, putting in the $9,500 in as a special service, you're really looking at a $3 difference to the rural taxpayer. If that's helpful.
Mayor Elena?
And I would be really happy to add to whatever the motion was going to be to reduce down to 2.7% to absorb the community care transportation tax levy impact of $9,500.
Wonderful. Do we have anything else currently? Okay, I'm seeing nothing right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a brief bio break, a 5-minute bio break. We'll come back at 2:20, and then we will discuss what's going on next with the budget. Thank you. Okay, so moving on with the meeting. So we're in a wonderful position right now as we've gone through a lot of this already today, and we still have lots of time left for today. So I'm going to do a quick little heat check just to see, but I believe that we can potentially push forward onto the next phase of this meeting. So everybody here seem like they're okay with moving on with the rest of the meeting and going through with our motions? Not seeing any real opposition, so we're going to move on, and we're going to actually put forth motions right now. So hopefully we have had an opportunity with the clerk. Does staff need any more time to maybe prepare some motions, or is staff okay right now for us to start proceeding forward?
I think the intention would be for council to put forward motions. I know some council members have provided some sample wording, and we've provided options back to the mayor and to some council members, and then we're happy to put those up on the screen, Mr. Chair, and then after that, and then council has an option at that point whether they wish to vote on those with a mover and seconder. One thing I would ask, because it was not anticipated that this would happen today, so I just ask for a bit of patience as we move forward with that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so, yes, absolutely.
So can I, so if we're doing motions this afternoon, does that mean it's our intention potentially to not have the meeting on Thursday?
Oh, wonderful, wonderful for asking that question. And yes, that is the intention, is maybe that we can get everything completed today so that we no longer have to have the meeting on Thursday. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because it is very important for the public to know that too, so that they're not coming here on Thursday and the meeting is already completed. Councillor Clare.
Just in which case, so I know that I spoke about the desire to have a second meeting, and I appreciated that that's how that was built into the process. And I know for me, there is a high likelihood that I'll have something that occurs to me at 4 a.m. this morning or tomorrow morning that I haven't thought of while I'm at the table. So I know that we've had some conversations about the new process and where there are additional opportunities for bringing forward amendments after today, should we wish to. And I wondered if the clerk could just to speak to those other opportunities in the process so that the public and we all can be assured that we're not preventing ourselves from bringing something forward if we have a brainwave in the middle of the night.
Yeah, Madam Mayor.
Maybe I'm just going to weigh in on this from my perspective, and that is that I think that we will continue to have to make some, important decisions over the next number of months while we are still an active council. And I think that we have the benefit to be in a much stronger financial position this year in order to accommodate some of those needs. And so I don't want you to feel, Councillor Clare, that if something comes to you, whether it's 4 o'clock in the morning tonight or 4 o'clock in the morning a week from now, that there still won't be an opportunity to bring that forward for discussion, deliberation, and potential funding. So I just, from my perspective, I want to make that, really clear, because inevitably things come up all the time over which we make funding decisions and allocations.
I'm just pulling up the slide right now on the process. Sorry, give me one moment, folks. But essentially, my perspective to answer your question, Councillor Holloway Wadwani, is that if the first step, this is a pre-budget process. So right now, the strong mayor's budget, in accordance with provincial legislation, has not been proposed, as this is the initial discussion of the staff proposed budget. So the intention was, of course, to have the 2 days to go through that. To the chair's point, it seems that the consensus at this point is to make some motions today so that the second day is not necessary. Again, absolutely within council's prerogative to move forward with that. But that would mean that there would be no other meeting where council could consider any further amendments to the staff proposed budget. So the next moment would be that for the mayor's budget would be proposed on January 20th, I believe, would be when the mayor's budget would be proposed. And at that point, if there were some significant amendments that council members wanted to bring forward to that, they would be able to do so through that prescribed process.
Thank you. And Councillor Clare, does that answer your questions well?
Yeah, no, I fully appreciate that. I just thought it should be something that we speak about
Absolutely.
publicly so that the public also understands what's happening.
Very important. Okay. Oh, Madam Mayor.
So just in terms of where we are right now, would everybody feel comfortable if the clerk was to put up the motions for us to have a look at and for us to be really clear about the consensus on them and then move forward from there?
Absolutely. I think that's a great suggestion, and it looks like the clerk is doing it
Yep,
right.
I will put forward, the motions there in just a moment, and I just request the movers and seconders, if they wish to adjust any of this language, please let me know, because I just drafted these, and just give me one moment, please.
Councillor Darrell will second my motion to the clerk.
So there are two motions there that were provided. One was Councillor Todd's motion, which is before Mayor Olana's. So the one on the top there is Councillor Todd's. But Councillor Todd, I do want to note that you would require a seconder. So my recommendation from a procedural perspective would be to consider these two motions separately.
Yep, absolutely, and thank you for that. So we will work on the first motion, moved by Councillor Attridge. I need a seconder on that motion, seconded by Councillor Clare. Let's open it up for discussion. Is there any discussion from council right now? Seeing none, so I'm going to move to the vote. All in favor? And that has been passed unanimously. So moving on to our second motion. The second motion from the mayor. It has been moved by the mayor and seconded by Councillor Toms. Is there any discussion from council?
You wanted a recorded vote?
Yep, absolutely.
I am going to call for a recorded vote on this motion, but I also want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the conversation we had about the dam. So I don't know if you want to have a conversation about the dam before we go to this, in a sense, final recorded vote. And so, going back to the conversation we had earlier about the different items for consideration that we still have in front of us, I do very much see this in the same ways as sort of the Walton Street and the bridge situation, where we're going to need to make a decision on this really quickly. And I think that at least I would like us to be supporting the GRC application and using the same mechanism that was being proposed for those items for consideration to do so that it has no impact on the tax levy, but that we are in agreement that is a priority for action, just as much as I don't want to lose sight of Councillor Tom's proposal, which I think could come through another council meeting, where he puts a motion forward that we request some kind of application to increase food security in our community, and then that would lend itself to an application from the food bank that we could then support.
Okay, so if you're okay with that, then I guess we'll move to Councillor Minks for the GRC. Is that what you're suggesting?
So I guess this is a question to the CIO. What you were saying previously is that there could be direction that we give to staff to potentially make an amendment to items for consideration. Does this have to come through a formal motion? And if so, then we should craft something that gets that point across. Again, I don't think we need to make it overly complicated, but just necessarily that we don't lose sight of it. And I think that for the food bank, that's something we can definitely entertain at the next meeting, because it doesn't have the same time sensitivities as the dam situation. So I'm going to let
I'm going to think out loud here, if you'll forgive me. The items for future consideration are not part of the budget. So I'm trying to make the distinction between motions here for the budget and motions for future consideration.
Yeah.
I think council's intent here is not to lose sight of the 3 or 4 items: the dam, the water tower, the bridge, the water main. So there's a bunch of items for future consideration that aren't forming. And I think your intent is to have a motion to make sure that we consider these in the near future, or as more information becomes available. And I'm going to look to the clerk to see if that makes sense to be a motion, or it's just coming out of conversation that we know, because it's not a part of the budget. It's not forming part of the budget. So we're looking for motions that are going to form and inform the budget for the Strong Mayor's budget to be finally completed. If it's council's comfort level to make sure that staff are, it's always on staff's radar, because we will add that to our action register to make sure it's not forgotten, more than happy to entertain a motion to include those items for a future conversation when available, information becomes available.
Except I would just want, yes, but there's a huge timeline on this. So maybe something that's not just, keeping it on the radar, but working towards the timeline of the application that is available to us.
I see my clerk is madly typing away here, so that will.
Councillor Mink first.
So for me in this position, to verbally say we're not losing sight of it is very ambiguous. There's other items on this budget that are less than $25,000 that would be required. So I'm not comfortable leaving here going, okay, we won't lose sight of it. That doesn't give me that assurance that this is something that we're prioritizing and that we're setting funds for. That would be my comfort level at this point. And so I would like that. I'm not prepared for a motion because I wasn't prepared today to have that. So I think that I would be comfortable having something in writing to say that this is a priority.
Okay, yeah, and the clerk is working on that right now. Councillor Clare.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo Councillor Mink's statement, and I'm going to actually quote our own clerk. When she came to train, doing the training on procedures for committees, she told us at the EAC, when in doubt, pass a motion, because then it's in the minutes.
And I think that is incredible information to get and advice. Madam Mayor.
So I would definitely support that. So maybe while the clerk is putting some language together that has some teeth, maybe we can just all read the motion prior to that so everybody is comfortable with that wording.
So through you, Chair, I asked the clerk to move up the motion for the $9,500 for the Community Care Northumberland ahead of the mayor's motion to reduce the budget, because that would be added to the budget, and then, subsequently the mayor's motion would include that to bring it down to 2.7. So it's just a little bit of a flip, and the clerk, the Mayor Hankivsky, seconded by Councillor, should move down above her motion, and then we'll take a first and seconder on the $9,500.
Okay, so we will go back a little bit and we'll change this up. And yes, we will work on the motion. The council endorses the mayor's intention to include the $9,500 operational budget related to the support of the Community Care Northumberland. So I would need a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by the mayor and seconded by Councillor Mink, and open for discussion. What?
Yeah, so the first one is
For this.
second one is Hankivsky, Tom's.
Yep, take your time. So I believe at this point we can open it up for discussion while the clerk is typing away there. So any discussion from council on this? No, I'm seeing none. You okay now?
So, Chair Pearson, if we could just ensure that we are voting on the relevant motion, because we have discussed a few there. So to confirm, the motion under consideration moved by Mayor Hankivsky, seconded by Councillor Mink, that council endorse the mayor's intention to include the $9,500 in the operating budget related to support for community care in Northumberland, and that is the motion under consideration.
That is correct. So again, I will open it up for questions. Councillor Mink.
Yeah, so I just have something to say. So I think thank you. This is very generous, and I do acknowledge that rural transit, if we're moving in that direction, would be a special service, and that, I do also support looking at options in the future, but I think that this covers what we need at this time. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Seeing none, so I will move to a vote. All in favor? And that has been passed unanimously. So before we do the second motion by the mayor, are there any other motions that the council would like to put forward now so that, sorry, Councillor.
Sorry, I was just going to say, are we going to do the Garden Hill Dam before the mayor's?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that all the other motions are above that one, because that's kind of like the finalized type one. Yep. So we can work on the Garden Hill Dam one right now. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. So, once I see it again. Absolutely, take your time. Yep. Okay, so the motion is that council direct staff to work towards the timeline for the Garden Hill Dam application process through the GRCA. It has been moved by Councillor Mink, and I would need a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Attridge, and open for discussion. Councillor Attridge.
So, just for clarification, are we committing funds? I think there was to funds. I'm looking to Councillor Mink for your direction.
Could it be that that council directs staff to work towards the timeline and funding for the Garden Hill Dam application process through the GRCA and just acknowledge timeline and funding together without saying, is that possible? I don't know.
I was actually going to suggest that because the largest option on the table of this is $75,000. So could we not earmark to a maximum of $75,000? And then that way, regardless of what the GRC comes back, either we're going to do the lower of the two figures or to the maximum, but then we have the entire envelope already earmarked?
So just for clarification, my understanding from Councillor Mink is that there's a new option on the table. So we were presented these several weeks ago, commissioning or not commissioning, and now it sounds like there's a different option that we were going to go, have conversations with GRCA on, a smaller scale back version, a smaller pond, all sorts of things. So I understand what you're saying, Council, like to set a threshold, but we don't know what that could be now without a conversation with them.
My understanding was the options was either to repair or decommission. They're leaning towards decommission. We have that figure in front of us at 75,000, or are you thinking it could go higher than that?
I'm looking to Councillor Mink on this, who on the board, GRCA, with new information, so I don't have any information other than what we were presented
Councillor
earlier.
Yes, I believe the decommissioning would be 25,000 for this year. And then if they went the the decommissioning, there'd be an environmental assessment that would be done, and then the following year, depending on other participants, there'd be a different funding model, and that we're not quite there yet. But that's why I think the discussion with GRCA, they'd have more information. And could this not come back if we have different information and be amended on January 24th with an actual amount, if that's the case? Or do we just leave it like this? Yeah.
Councillor Clare.
Is the GRCA looking to our council to determine whether we're repairing or removing? And if so, should our motion indicate that this would be towards the decommissioning option? Anyone know?
Councillor Mink.
Yes, so they're looking for that, I think, that discussion of Jeanette.
Apologies, sorry, I did have a chance to follow up with Corey. GRCA is looking for direction from Port Hope Council on whether or not you are interested in repairing or decommissioning. So the decommissioning would be $75,000. That could be split over the 2 years, and the decommissioning work would be done as part of the next application in 2027. 2028. It takes 2026 to do the public consultation in EA, 2026, 27, and then submit another application in 28. But they are looking for direction on how to proceed with that application.
Councillor Thoms?
Yeah, my thought process would be, I think we need to, before we commit to a decommission and forever change what Garden Hill looks like, to go to Garden Hill residents and say we're decommissioning without showing them a plan of what's coming, I don't think is a very good idea.
Mayor Hankivsky?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that this requires, I mean, I would be prepared to even call a special meeting around this if there's timeline. I don't think it should be tacked onto a budget conversation. I think there's a consultation process, but I think this kind of motion commits us to actually engage in this kind of process. And I think that, to me, captures the spirit of what Councillor Mink didn't want us to walk away from today.
Yeah, I completely agree. Is there any other discussions on the motion that is on the floor right now? Councillor Clare.
But I'm a little confused because when I look at that motion, I'm pretty sure the timeline is that they need to submit an application, but they can't submit an application unless they know whether we are decommissioning. So are we saying, should we maybe instead pass a motion saying that we should see this on our agenda before, or is it the end of January? Like, we don't have, if we do a special council meeting, we won't have time to get in the application if we're not decommissioning. You see what I mean?
Our CIO.
I guess my question is directed to Councillor Mink. Do you know the application deadline, or Director Davidson, do you know when that deadline is for the application?
The GRCA is identified February or March as the application deadline. The application is currently not open, so the closing date hasn't been set yet.
We have time, right? So the other option is to Councillor Attridge's point is, okay, we do have some generalized funding direction through their presentation. We could put a funding dollar amount in there, and then we can continue the conversation, explore. So, and then that would come out of a reserve, or, you know, the mayor's direction still for funding to come into the 2.7.
Okay, Madam Mayor.
I also think just because we don't have all the information or haven't consulted, I don't want to put a dollar figure on it because we don't even know what the potential range is. But I do like the fact that we are committing to the process, we're committing to the timelines, we're committing to some kind of funding, and you know, then once we know more, we can always do a special meeting around this and really have a fulsome conversation.
Is there any other comments that are different? Sorry, I'm just looking at the clerk because it looks like.
So through the chair, you know, Councillor Mink, are you comfortable with the revised motion that's up there?
Yes, I'm happy with that. I think that what Councillor Darrow brought up is absolutely a valid, very important point that I lost sight of. But yeah, that motion I think, captures everything without being too specific, which I think we need at this time.
Okay, does anybody need me to read the motion out again before we are ready for a vote? Yep, okay, so the council directs staff to work towards the timeline and the funding for the Garden Hill Dam application process through the GRCA. That staff be directed to bring back information on options regarding potential next steps. It has been moved by Councillor Mink. It has been seconded by Councillor Attridge. I believe we've had enough discussion. We will be moving to a vote. All in favor? And that has been passed unanimously. Okay, moving on. Are there any other motions to be put on the table right now from council that is not this one? Okay, I believe the clerk is asking for a 5-minute break, so we will take a very brief break. Oh, I thought that's what you were asking. No. Oh, okay, I apologize for that. I thought the clerk was asking for a little bit of time there. So, are there any more motions to be put on the table? Madam Mayor?
I just want to make sure that we're reverting back to this is a recorded vote request.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that. And when we get to this one, I just wanted to make sure there wasn't anything before, because it's kind of like a finalized type one. So I'm seeing no other ones, so we will be moving on to the motion that is in front of us right now, that council endorses the mayor's intention to bring forward a proposed 2.7% increase for the 2026 Strong Mayor's budget, and the council further endorses the mayor's intention to use any available community benefit reserve funds to offset costs associated with the remaining approved capital and operating projects as identified through the 2026 budget process and subject to staff's review. It has been moved by Mayor Hankivsky. It has been seconded by Councillor Toms, and this is the opportunity for discussion. Mayor Hankivsky.
And just to give you a little bit of contour around what this means in terms of dollar figures, it's approximately $350,000.
That is great information to have. Any other discussions? I'm seeing none. So the mayor has requested a recorded vote, so I will pass this over to the clerk now.
So thank you very much, Chair Pearson. So requested by Mayor Hankivsky, there is a request for a recorded vote in accordance with Procedure Bylaw, Section 53. So we will start with council members in alphabetical order, and I would request that you indicate either yes or no with respect to the vote that is up on the screen there and has been read by Chair Pearson. So we will start with Councillor Andrews.
Yes.
Councillor Attridge.
Yes.
Councillor Holloway Wadwani.
Yes.
Councillor Mink.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Pearson.
Yes.
Councillor Toms.
Yes.
Mayor Hankivsky.
Heck yes.
Chair Pearson, that's total of 7 votes, so the motion passes unanimously.
Wonderful, thank you for that. Councillor Clare.
Now that we've passed that, when the mayor's budget does come forward reflecting that lower increase and the additional contribution from reserves towards infrastructure, can we see an updated version of that lovely infrastructure gap? Because what we did already in the staff budget left us just a sliver shy of closing that inflation gap, and I'd love to see whether this puts us over the top there.
So through you, Chair, this is a generalized this is actually offsetting operating. This is not going towards the capital budget because the capital budget has been formed based on the reserve and the 2% capital levy that we're using from the community benefit fund. So we'd love to, but not possible.
Director Baxter.
Yeah, if I may share, Councillor Clare and I had previously spoke about this, just recognizing the graph, and I really appreciate the interest in this council of making sure that we are doing the more appropriate and proactive steps for infrastructure funding. The 2026 column, right when we look at the inflation, is an estimate. We won't know until a little bit later than this time next year exactly what that goes in. So hopefully we're seeing inflation coming down. And hopefully, when we do the next update, for this, well, it'll be a year from now, that inflation has come down and we actually have, hit that. At the same time, if we were to increase it just that little bit so you didn't see it right now, there's the same risk that that inflation is actually higher and we think we did and we didn't. So the good part is we're in the ballpark, right? We're, as I said before, we've now established a plan, and I'm really happy that in the first year following the establishment of the plan, we are following the plan. So appreciate that and the support this council's given to being more proactive in terms of our infrastructure funding. Certainly, if you look at that, the chart, we've done, a lot more over the past 4 years, right, than we had done in prior years during really challenging high inflation times. So it's been excellent.
And I appreciate that. So I'm going to look at council. Is there anything else? I'm seeing none, thankfully. Oh, sorry, Madam Mayor.
Just a comment about how much I've really appreciated bringing you forward and participating in a collaborative process with my council on the budget.
Thank you, and I think that we all appreciate you allowing us. And okay, so now the next steps. So now that we have concluded the deliberations of the staff proposed budget, we have provided our recommendation to the mayor. I want to talk briefly about the next steps. At the January 20th, 2026 council meeting, the mayor will speak to her budget. This marks the start of the amendment request period as per council's established timelines. A friendly reminder that the clerk's team has provided guidance on this process to all council members, so ensure that you review that documentation. If amendment requests are made by members, they'll be reviewed at the February 3rd, 2026 council meeting, special council meeting. If none are received, the budget will automatically be adopted as per legislation, and staff will move forward with all the communication. For any questions, feel free to reach out to the finance team or the clerk's team. I would like to thank the entire staff for all their extremely hard work over the many months of putting this budget together for council. I'd also like to thank the council for a wonderful day of budget, honestly. As far as budget meetings go, I think that it was pretty wonderful. And I'd like to make a special thank you to the mayor for allowing us to have this collaborative approach to the budget and have this staff budget presented to us. So moving on to the confirmatory bylaw, it is now time for the confirmatory bylaw. This bylaw confirms the proceedings that took place over the course of today. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Moved by the mayor and seconded by Councillor Clare. All in favor? And that has been passed unanimously. And I am in a position to adjourn this special council meeting. Thank you. At 2:59.